Welcome, to the Cursed Hour, where every whisper in the dark, every creak in the floor, might be something watching threes. If you found this channel, you're already part of the curse. The Guardian in the Dark. The old house creaked under the weight of its years, its walls whispering secrets in the dead of night. I lay in my small bed, the room's shadows pooling like ink, my mother's soft breathing a fragile anchor in the dark. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp wood and something older, something that didn't belong. I was young, too young to understand, but old enough to feel it. A presence, cold and unyielding, watching from the corners, waiting for me to notice. The house was a ruin when we moved in, its peeling paint and sagging floors a canvas of neglect. We patched it up, room by room, but no amount of work could erase its past, its memory of lives long gone. My bed pressed against the wall, my mother's beside it, her nightstand a small island of light in the gloom. I shared her room, a necessity born of circumstance, but it was here, in this cramped space, that the unseen found me. Its gaze a weight I couldn't shake. At first, it was subtle, a flicker at the edge of my vision, a chill that lingered too long. My siblings and I played board games late, our laughter a shield against the dark. But we saw it, something moving, just out of reach, a shadow that didn't belong. We whispered of ghosts, half joking, half afraid. But the feeling grew, a certainty that we weren't alone. The house wasn't ours. It belonged to something else, something that knew our names. I'd wake in the night, my heart racing, the room too still, too quiet. The shadows seemed to breathe, their edges shifting, forming shapes I couldn't name. I'd clutch my blanket, my eyes darting to my mother's bed, her presence a comfort that couldn't reach the dark. The house was alive, its creaks a language I didn't understand, its silence a promise of something to come. I was a child, but I knew fear, and it lived in these walls. The presence grew bolder, its touch more tangible, a cold that seeped into my bones. I'd lie awake, listening, waiting, knowing it was there, just beyond the light. The nightstand's glow was a frail defense, its light swallowed by the dark. And I'd pray for dawn, for the world to return. But the dark had its own rules, its own will, and it had chosen me, a witness to its secrets, a child caught in its gaze. Me and my family moved into this pretty old house in England, and it was in pretty bad condition when we moved in, so we had to do some renovations to fix it up. The house was a labyrinth of creaks and drafts, its history etched in every crack. For personal reasons, I had to share a room with my mother, my bed pressed against the wall, hers beside it with a small nightstand. As you came into the room, this is what it would look like. On the left is a wall, and on the right was my little bed. Hugging the left wall was my mother's bed, and a small all-night stand. The room was small, its shadows deep, a stage for the unseen. It started off slow, such as me and my siblings seeing someone at the corner of our eyes, while we would play board games late at night, or just feeling like we were being watched. We'd laugh it off, but the chill lingered, a presence that grew with each passing night. Although I shared a bedroom with my mother, I would keep all my toys and stuff in my brother's room, so we would often be in there late at night playing or talking. The house watched, its silence a warning, its shadows a promise. Every time that I would leave the room, the exact same toy would come launching off the shelf it sat on and land at my feet. It wasn't chance. It was deliberate. A message I couldn't ignore. A call from the dark that targeted me. A child too curious, too afraid to turn away. The house wasn't just old, it was alive. Its walls a canvas for something older, something that lingered in the cracks. My siblings and I felt it, a presence that grew bolder, its touch more tangible with each passing night. My parents, they were big believers in the paranormal, so they would tell us to ignore it and don't pay attention to it. But we were children, curious and defiant, our fear laced with fascination. Obviously, we never listened, whispering of ghosts, daring each other to look into the shadows, unaware that the shadows were looking back. The toy's flight was only the beginning, a playful taunt that turned sinister. From there, it would get worse and worse, and it seemed to be targeting me. I'd wake in the night, my heart pounding, the room too still, the air too heavy. One night, I was asleep in my mother's room as usual when I suddenly woke and was sitting up. My eyes opened. The nightstand's faint glow, a frail defense. And there it was, a short figure, hunched over my mother's bed, its gaze fixed on her sleeping form. I opened my eyes, and through the little light in the room, I could see a short figure standing by my mother's nightstand and hunched over, staring at her. Terror seized me, a scream tearing from my throat, raw and desperate. I didn't have time to pay attention to the details, since I immediately started screaming and crying so loud, my mother woke up thinking that I was being murdered. My mother stirred, her voice a lifeline, the figure vanishing as light flooded the room. As soon as my mother woke up, the figure disappeared. She calmed me down and put me back to bed. I clung to her, my tears soaking her shirt, my fear a weight she couldn't lift. Honestly, I thought it was over, but that was really just the beginning, a prelude to a routine that would haunt me night after night. From that point on, it would be a nearly nightly routine. At least 4 times a week, I would wake up in the middle of the night, sit up and look over to my mother's nightstand and see the exact same thing. The figure returned, relentless, its presence a shadow that clung to the dark, some sort of figure standing over my mother, and again I would scream and cry and so on. My screams became a ritual, my fear a constant, the room a stage for this silent watcher. Sometimes my mother would leave a little bit of light turned on for me on her nightstand, but that didn't help either, the glow only sharpening the figure's outline, its form a truth I couldn't escape. I began to see her clearly, a little girl, her blonde hair catching the light, her dark blue dress adorned with flowers. Eventually, I managed to identify what it was too. It was a little girl with blonde hair in a dark blue dress with light blue patterns and flowers on it. She was no less terrifying for her clarity, her gaze a weight that pinned me to my bed. Even though I could tell what I was looking at, it still absolutely terrified me, and I would still scream and cry nearly every night. She wasn't always by the nightstand. Sometimes she stood by the door, her eyes on me, or closer, near my bed. Her presence a silent threat that stole my sleep. The house seemed to feed her, its creaks a chorus to her visits, its shadows a cloak for her form. My siblings saw her too, fleeting glimpses in the halls, a chill in the air when we played. But she chose me, her gaze a constant, her presence a puzzle I couldn't solve. Was she a ghost, a memory, or something else, a guardian or a menace? My parents' warnings rang hollow, their belief in the paranormal, a cold comfort against the fear that gripped me each night. A child caught in a dance with the unknown. The room was a prison, its walls closing in, the nightstand's light a mockery of safety. I'd lie awake, listening to the house's whispers, waiting for her, knowing she'd come. The forest's shadows, the beach's lights, the trail's threats. They were distant. But this was my reality. A nightly ritual of fear. A truth that shaped me. A presence that wouldn't let me go. The little girl's visits were a relentless tide, washing over me night after night. Her presence a shadow that clung to my dreams. Sometimes it would be in a different spot, instead of next to the nightstand, such as standing by the door, looking at me, instead of my mother, and sometimes closer to my bed. Her gaze was unyielding, her blue dress a constant in the dark, its flowers a cruel mockery of innocence. Eventually, my mother got tired of me waking her by screaming and crying, and she went to see a psychic. Her exhaustion was palpable. My fear, a burden she couldn't bear. A nightly ritual that tore at our peace. She described what was happening to us every night to the psychic. And the psychic told my mother that it's a little girl called Samantha that has been following my mother since she was a child. The words were a revelation, a name for the shadow that haunted me. Samantha, a guardian angel, a spirit tied to my mother's past. The psychic also drew an image of the little girl which my mother showed me when she came home, and I immediately started bawling because, I kid you not, it was the exact same girl. The drawing was her, every detail perfect. The blonde hair, the blue dress, the flowers, a truth that shattered my fear, replacing it with awe, with questions I couldn't answer. We have since moved out of that house, and I no longer live with my mother. But Samantha's presence lingered, a memory etched into my soul. I do have plenty more experiences from that house and in others that I've lived in. Shadows that followed me, whispers that didn't fade. The house was a portal, a place where the veil was thin, where Samantha found us, her gaze a constant, her purpose a mystery. Was she protecting my mother? Or claiming her, a guardian or a ghost, a friend or a foe? The psychic's words offered comfort, a story to make sense of the fear, but they didn't erase the nights I'd spent screaming. The moments when Samantha's gaze turned to me. Her presence was dual, a shield for my mother, a terror for me, a paradox I couldn't resolve. The house's creaks, its damp walls, its shadows, they were her domain, a stage for her silent watch, a place where she ruled the dark. I'd see her in my dreams, her dress a flicker in the gloom, her eyes a question I couldn't answer. I researched spirits, seeking answers in old books and whispered tales, finding stories of guardians, of ghosts tied to families, of souls that lingered for love or loss. Samantha fit the mold. A child bound to my mother, her watch a vow that spanned decades. But why me? Why my fear? Why the toy that flew? The gaze that chilled? The house was a catalyst, its history a magnet for the unseen, its walls a canvas for her presence, a truth I'd glimpsed as a child. My siblings remembered her too, their stories a mirror to mine, flickers in the halls, chills in the air, a toy that moved when it shouldn't. We'd laugh now, older, braver, but the fear lingered, a shadow in our memories, a truth we couldn't deny. The house was gone, its walls left behind, but Samantha wasn't. Her presence a thread in our lives, a guardian or a ghost, a mystery we'd never solve. I didn't return to that room. Its shadows too deep, its memories too vivid. The nightstand's light, the creaking floors, the damp air, they were hers, a stage for her watch, a place where fear and wonder met. I carried her with me, a memory of blonde hair and blue flowers, a truth that shaped me, a child caught in the dark, a witness to the unknown. The world was bigger now, its mysteries vast. But Samantha was mine, a guardian in the dark, a presence I'd never forget, a story I'd tell forever. The silent flight. The farmland stretched into a void of darkness, the night air thick with an unnatural stillness that prickled my skin. My buddy and I had just lit a fire in the middle of the field, its crackling a fragile defiance against the silence, when a cold shiver ran down my spine, not from the breeze, but from something unseen watching us. The grandparents' house loomed in the distance, its windows dark, leaving us isolated under the vast sky. A presence hovered, silent and vast, its intent brushing against my senses like a warning I couldn't ignore. The fire's glow cast long shadows across the dirt path, the woods beyond a wall of black where shapes seemed to shift. We settled in, beers in hand, the music a thin shield against the quiet, when the air grew heavy, charged with an electric hum I couldn't place. My heart thudded as the darkness seemed to pulse, as if something was drawing closer, its gaze piercing the night. The isolation of the field, far from town, amplified my unease. No help, no escape, just us and whatever lurked beyond the trees. I turned to toss another log on the fire, the flames flaring briefly, when my buddy's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Look up!" he hissed. The sky above the tree line erupted with a light so bright it burned my eyes, a white glare that pinned us in place, its intensity unnatural, its source unseen. I squinted, my breath catching, as the light pulsed, a beacon that felt alive, aware, watching us as we watched it. The field, once a refuge, had become a stage for something beyond our understanding. The light moved, a smooth glide to the right, silent and swift, defying the laws of the stars we knew. My body froze, my buddy's wide eyes mirroring my terror, as the glow revealed a shape, a flying vessel, close, maybe 300 to 400 feet above the woods. Its speed was impossible, its silence deafening, and the light from its side obscured its form, a deliberate veil. It was as if it sensed our gaze, retreating the moment we noticed, slipping away into the night like a wooam. The field felt smaller, the fire weaker. Under its fleeting presence, we stood, beers forgotten. The fire's warmth a poor comfort against the chill that settled in. The light vanished beyond the horizon, leaving a void where it had been, a silence that roared in its wake. My buddy and I exchanged hushed whispers, our voices trembling, as if speaking too loud might summon it back. The encounter had marked us, a mystery etched into the night, and the farmland, once familiar, now held a secret we couldn't unravel. This happened in February of 2020. I live in the central Arkansas area for reference too. So my buddy's grandparents owned some farmland about 15 to 20 minutes outside of our town, and we would regularly spend the night out there on weekends with some of our other friends. We would make a fire drink, etc. And this particular weekend, it was just him and I. It was pretty dark by the time that we got there, but it was the standard fare. We had decided to set up the fire on the dirt path that ran from my friend's grandparents' house through their field to the woods. But this day, we built the fire closer to the middle of the field. The light's departure didn't end the night's strangeness. Not long after we get the fire started, we sit down and get some music going and crack open our first beers. He turns off the music and notices something in the sky behind me. My back was facing the woods, so I turned to look. There was a a bright light in the sky above the tree line. I wasn't too weirded out by this, and neither was he. However, I had never seen a star that bright before. We stared, trying to make sense of it, pulling out my phone to check a stargazing app. I opened up his stargazer app on my phone that I had had forever, thinking that we were close to a planet or something. But before I could even point my phone in that direction, the star suddenly moved. At this point, we both froze. The movement was a shock, a violation of everything we knew about the sky. The light moved quickly and smoothly to the right, without any bobs or waves or anything, and was utterly silent. That was when I noticed that the light was coming from some kind of flying vehicle. It was actually much closer than we thought it was, probably ours to 400 feet away, flying above the woods. This thing was also incredibly fast. Too fast to move that quietly, without making any sort of noise. It was dark though, and I couldn't make out exactly what the vehicle was, and the bright light emitting from its side sort of obscured any good look. Its retreat felt deliberate, as if it had been watching us all along. But it moved perfectly parallel with the tree line just right above it, and it was like it had left. When it noticed that we had noticed it, we continued watching, as the UFO just quickly and quietly moved on, in a straight line. Until it was beyond our sight. A few seconds later, we just sort of looked at each other, like what the heck was that? And began to discuss what we had just seen, sort of in hushed tones, like we were dreaming. The aftermath left us shaken. The night no longer ours. 20 minutes or so later, we hear a noise coming from the sky and see two loud planes flying side by side, going exactly the direction that the UFO had gone. At this point, we started to think that it was a military drone of some kind, and we didn't see or hear anything else that night. So we thought that it was that. I still think about it every now and then though, and I don't know. The whole military drone just doesn't really add up to me. I decided to share this in looking for some other people's opinions. So what do you all think? What do you think it could have been? The silence after the planes faded was uneasy, the field feeling smaller, the fire weaker. We sat, whispering theories, military drones, experimental aircraft, something extraterrestrial. The lack of noise from the initial light haunted me, a silence that defied logic, suggesting a technology beyond our grasp. My buddy suggested it might have been a test gone wrong. But the speed, the retreat when noticed, felt too intentional. The farmland, once a place of escape, now held a shadow, a question that lingered in every rustle of the grass. Days later, the memory gnawed at me, a puzzle I couldn't solve. I researched online, finding stories of similar lights, some dismissed as weather phenomena, others linked to government cover-ups. The idea of being watched, of that vessel turning away because it saw us, fueled my unease. My buddy and I rarely spoke of it, the event a shared secret that bound us in silence. The night had changed the field, turning a simple campfire into a witness to the unknown. The possibility of a military explanation lingered, but it didn't fit. The plane's noise contrasted sharply with the UFO's silence, their flight path a chase rather than a patrol. I wondered if we'd stumbled onto something forbidden, a secret the sky wasn't meant to reveal. The thought of those men in black suits, like in my grandma's story, crossed my mind, adding a layer of conspiracy. The farmland, once a playground, now felt like a stage for a drama we couldn't comprehend. The experience shaped my nights, a lens through which I viewed the stars. Every bright light in the sky now carried a flicker of that night, a reminder of the silent flight. I shared the story online, seeking validation, hoping others had seen it too. The responses varied, Skeptics, believers, theorists, each adding to the mystery, but none erasing the image burned into my memory. The field remains, quiet and dark, but its silence now holds a question I'll carry forever. The stalker in the beige SUV, the neon lights of the college town buzzed, casting a glow over the crowded streets, but I felt exposed, alone in my folding chair. At 20th, street performing was my lifeline, a way to scrape together cash for skin removal surgery after a drastic weight loss. The bars and restaurants pulsed with life, students and locals spilling out, their laughter mingling with my guitar's hum. But something in the air felt off, a prickle on my skin that warned me to stay sharp. I adjusted my scarf, tied into a makeshift dress to avoid looking homeless. People could be cruel if they thought you were down on your luck. As I tuned my strings, a beige SUV rolled up, its headlights pinning me like a spotlight. The driver's eyes locked onto me, unblinking, and my gut twisted. Was he just curious? Or was he here for something darker? I was tuning up my guitar, sitting in a camping chair outside of a couple of bars, when the SUV parked right in front of me. This beige SUV pulls up and parks in front of me. A man stepped out, maybe in his 30s, unremarkable, but for the intensity in his stare. The guy driving it hopped out and approached me. "Hey, do you want something to eat?" he asked, his voice overly friendly. "Oh, no thanks. I'm okay, but thank you," I replied, forcing a smile. He nodded, climbed back into his car, but didn't leave. Instead of driving away, he just sat there staring at me. I brushed it off, focusing on my set, the crowd's energy pulling me in. I thought it was a little bit strange at the time, but I was focused on getting warmed up. The dinner rush was fading, the bar crowd swelling, and I needed to make the most of it. But his gaze lingered, heavy, like a weight on my shoulders. An hour later, I noticed he was still there, unmoving in his driver's seat. It took me a while to realize that the beige SUV was still there, and the guy was still sitting in the driver's seat staring at me. My fingers faltered on the strings, the music stumbling. I'm pretty sure he didn't even pay the parking meter. He stepped out again, his smile tighter now. He hops out again. "Hey, are you hungry yet?" "No, I'm okay. I ate before I came out here," I said, my patience thinning. "Come on. I want to give you something, but I don't have cash. Let me buy you dinner." This does happen when someone who doesn't carry cash sees a street musician that they like. So I softened slightly. "Okay, sure. If you want to bring me a snack, that's cool." "Okay, come with me." No, I mean I'm not leaving my spot here," I clarified, gesturing to my setup. He pressed, mentioning a restaurant too far to walk. "There's a really good restaurant I want to take you to though, but it's too far to walk. We need to drive there." I shook my head. "Sorry. I'm not really interested in going somewhere. I need to stay here and make some money tonight." His insistence grew sharper. "I thought you were hungry. Come on, let me buy you dinner." Me starting to get frustrated, I snapped back. "No, look, I told you I'm not actually that hungry. If you want to tip me with something other than cash, a slice of pizza from the place across the street, or a soda or something that I'm fine with. But I'm not leaving this spot." He scoffed. "Okay, no, I'm not going to buy you a slice of pizza if you want dinner. You need to come with me." The crowd streamed past, oblivious, as my annoyance flared. "Well, I'm not going anywhere, and I need to make some money tonight, so I'm done talking about this." I strummed my guitar, cutting him off. I started playing my guitar to show him that I was done with this conversation. I'd dealt with men like this before, offers of food or shelter with strings attached. But his persistence felt different, more calculated. For an hour, I lost myself in the music, the tips piling up in my case. For about the next hour, I focused on just playing music and chatting with people. But then I saw him again, leaning against his car door, still watching. He got out of his car and leaned against the door, still staring at me. The realization hit hard. It dawned on me that he had been there for over 2 hours. My focus shattered, his stare boring into me, no longer just creepy but menacing. I had a hard time focusing on the music after that, because he was just sort of standing there staring at me. The streets were packed, but they'd empty soon, and I'd have to walk home. I realized that I needed to do something sooner rather than later. I wasn't intimidating, petite, in friendly performer mode. But fear turned to anger. I walked right up to the guy, angry as heck by this point. "Look, why are you staring at me?" Taking aback, he says, "What? You've been staring at me for 3 hours now. Do you just like making younger women uncomfortable?" He stammered, caught off guard. No, I just want to buy you dinner." I pushed back, voice rising. "So you're just waiting for me to get hungry enough to go get dinner with you when I've already said no? Several times. That's not being helpful. It's being creepy," I pointed out. "I know that there aren't any restaurants still open around here anyway," he insisted. No. This one is, it's still open." I cut him off. "I don't care if it's still open because I don't want to go anywhere with you. And I told you that. So why are you still here waiting?" He fumbled. "No, you don't understand. What am I not understanding about you staring at me for the last 3 hours?" He blurted. "No, you see, I'm an Uber driver." I feigned belief. "Oh, okay. I get it. You've been waiting all this time for someone who ordered an Uber." He nodded. Yeah, that's it." I dropped the act. "And you were just going to leave them waiting while you took me to a restaurant then?" His facade crumbled. As soon as I blew a hole through this guy's story, it was suddenly like he took off a mask. His smile vanished, his voice cold and final. "Okay, you'll never see my face again." He climbed into his SUV and sped off. He drove off fast. I stood frozen, shock rooting me to the spot. I just stood there in shock. This wasn't like other creepy encounters. This felt like a predator unmasked. It was impossible to convince myself that he was going to do anything besides abduct me. I packed up, hands shaking, and called an Uber home, the fare eating half my tips. I decided to order an actual Uber home instead of walking, which cost about half of what I'd made in the tips that night. In the Uber, I realized street performing wasn't worth it anymore. I realized then that it was time to retire. The money wasn't enough to risk nights like this. I've since moved on to a new side hustle. The encounter left scars, diagnosed agoraphobia, a fear of leaving home alone, developed agrobio diagnosed by the way because of this and other incidents like it. I order groceries through DoorDash, work 3 blocks from my apartment, and check my surroundings obsessively. I find myself constantly checking my surroundings, using the reflection in the storefront windows to make sure that I'm not being followed. I scan for that beige SUV, praying his promise holds. I really hope that this creepy guy on the SUV keeps his promise, and that I never see his face again. The town still buzzes at night, but I stay away, haunted by the man who watched too long. His intentions, a shadow I can't shake. The boy who followed. The night was heavy with silence as Marcus pulled into his driveway, the hum of his Camaro fading into the darkness. The porch light was out, but his headlights swept across the front door, revealing a small figure, a boy, no older than 10, standing motionless. His pale form seemed to flicker, as if caught between worlds. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He stepped out, calling out. But the boy was gone, leaving only an icy chill in the air. The house. once shared with his family, now felt foreign, its shadows deeper since his divorce. He checked every room, finding nothing but stillness, yet the image of the boy lingered, unshakable. Days later, in a different city, the boy appeared again. Marcus, visiting his girlfriend in San Jose, glanced out a window to see a gray-skinned figure in his car, black eyes staring back. He blinked, and the seat was empty. But the dread clung to him, a warning of something beyond reason. The boy began to haunt Marcus's every step, appearing in parking lots, behind crowds, his faceless gaze a constant companion. Marcus, drowning in a bitter divorce and casino obsession, felt not fear, but irritation, as if the boy were a pest in his crumbling life. One night, trapped in sleep paralysis, Marcus heard the boy's voice in his ear, promising wealth if he'd let him play. The offer chilled him, but the next day, a $40,000 win at the casino made him wonder if the boy's promise held truth, or if he'd opened a door he couldn't close. The only other person to hear about this directly from me is my wife. Marcus, 34, shared the story with his new wife after their child's birth. A memory stirred by returning to the hospital where he once worked. I was recently reminded of it because we just had a baby at the hospital that I used to work at when all of this was going on in my life. His life in 2020 was a storm, a divorce, a custody battle for his 3-year-old son, and financial strain. Now my ex-wife and I had separated during the pandemic, making divorce and custody of our 3-year-old at the time an absolute nightmare. Courts were closed, proceedings dragged on via Zoom, and tensions escalated. Because courts weren't open, everything was tele-caught on Zoom calls, and things got dragged down all the time. Marcus had a new job offer, but its start was delayed by 10 weeks, then 6 more, leaving him unemployed for over 3 months. I had just received a job offer from a new hospital, but because of it had a start date that was 10 weeks out. So I gave my old hospital a 2-week notice and took 8 weeks off to myself. My new job pushed back my start date another 6 weeks due to not having enough appointments to get new hires cleared for work through employee health services, physical exams, so I'd be out of work a total of 3.5 months. The divorce grew vicious, with his ex-wife manipulating those around him, forcing Marcus to cut ties with friends. In that time to myself, I realized how nasty the divorce battle was getting, and how expensive it was, how much my ex was also manipulating people around me, that I started cutting off a lot of people close to me. He isolated himself, speaking only to his attorney, cousins, and girlfriend. I stopped talking to people who weren't my attorney either, my 2 cousins, or the woman I was seeing at the time. With gyms closed and no outlet, his savings dwindled under mounting bills and legal fees, and he missed his son desperately. The gyms weren't open, and I couldn't work out. By this stage, I wasn't on any verge or a mental breakdown or anything. But some things started to close in when I realized how many people I had to disassociate myself, with bills still coming while my savings were dwindling, attorney fees racking up. And I was missing my son a lot with no court order in line, and until one was in place, I only got him whenever his mom would let me, seeking distraction and money. Marcus turned to the casino, the only place open. In trying to pass time and also trying to find some financial gain, I started to frequent the only place that never closed the casino. He played baccarat for hours daily, earning comps but always returning home, hoping to see his son. I quickly found myself playing there daily for hours on end, and ended up racking up play points, getting offers for meal comps and free room stays. But I always went home at the end of the night in anticipation of maybe getting my son. the next morning. His routine became mechanical, driven by a casino psychosis where he left chips uncashed, knowing he'd return. Most of the time, I'd leave around 2 or 3 in the morning when the table action from Baccarat, my game of choice, would die down. Some days, I was in a casino psychosis, I guess you could call it, where I would leave not cash out any chips because I knew that I was coming back anyway. Each day, he'd check for updates on his son or lawyer, then drive 40 minutes back to the casino, slot machine sounds echoing in his mind. I'd get some sleep a little, and then I'd get back up and check my phone to see if I was getting my son for the day, and touch base with my attorney. Shower, get back into my car to head back to the casino 40 minutes away, all while the sounds of the slots were still ringing in my ears from the nights prior. One night, arriving home early, Marcus saw the boy by his door. One night, I came home at around 1 o'clock, and I had to be up early. I was pulling up to my house. My porch light wasn't on, but turning into my driveway, my headlight shined in that direction, and that was when I saw a boy, probably around maybe 10 years old, I would guess, by my door. He rushed out, thinking the child needed help, but found no one, and I hopped out of the car quickly, thinking that he might be in trouble when I got up to the door, though there was no one there. Convinced it wasn't fatigue, he recalled childhood paranormal experiences, but never in this house. I was certain that it was a boy, and I wasn't seeing things from being tired, because I wasn't. I experienced paranormal things when I was younger, but never in this house, so I automatically thought my house may be haunted. And it's the first time that this ghost, or whatever it was showing up now that nobody else stayed there besides me, perhaps. He searched the house, hearing nothing, and went to bed. Still, though, I checked around the house inside, sound still, waiting to hear anything, any creaks or cabinet doors closing, and eventually I just went to bed. In San Jose, visiting his girlfriend, the boy reappeared. I drove to San Jose the next day and stayed there, and it was then that I learned that it wasn't my house that the boy was staying in, because I saw him again while in a whole different city. Her townhome was 3 stories, with the master bedroom on top. My ex-girlfriend lived in this type of townhome. I guess that's 3 stories with the master bedroom being on top. It had a living room, a kitchen in the middle-level garage, and front door entryway was on the 1st floor. Fetching DoorDash. Marcus accidentally rolled down his car windows and saw the boy in the passenger seat. Gray skin, black eyes, barely visible over the dashboard. We'd ordered DoorDash at the end of the night, and when the food arrived, I looked down outside the window to see the dasher leaving, so I ran downstairs to grab the food with my car keys in hand. Since my car was right out front, I bent down to grab the food and unlocked my car, and held down on the unlock button, accidentally rolling windows down. And that's when I saw someone sitting in my passenger seat. Just gray skin, black eyes, and black hair, hardly able to see over the window of the 2018 Camaro. He found the car empty, saying nothing to his girlfriend. I ran up to the car, and when I did, nobody was in it. I got in to roll my windows back up and quickly ran back upstairs, with the food not saying anything about what I had just seen. Back home, the boy became a constant presence, appearing everywhere. I didn't see him again the next couple of days while staying there, but I got back home and did my routine again, making my way to the casino. And this is when I started seeing the boy more frequently. Whoever he was following me around everywhere. I'd see him at home, in parking lots, in distances behind crowds. He was short, but weirdly he looked well dead, sometimes faceless. He followed Marcus for 3 weeks, more annoying than terrifying amid his chaos. There was one occasion that I saw him, and he didn't even seem to have a face for 3 weeks. He followed me around too. I wasn't scared of him. I guess I felt like so much was going on. And some days, I was only caring about hitting on the tables that he sort of annoyed me more than creeped me out. One night, sleep paralysis gripped Marcus, the boy's silhouette in the corner, his voice whispering promises of riches if Marcus let him have fun. The words sent a chill through him, but he broke free, clinging to his Buddhist upbringing that warned against engaging spirits. The next day, Marcus won $40,000 at Baccarat, each bet doubling flawlessly. The boy stood by his door that night, grinning, as if claiming credit. But the next session ended in ruin, Marcus losing everything as the boy laughed from afar. Fury consumed Marcus, his life unraveling under gambling debts and legal battles. That night, the boy appeared again, and Marcus, pushed to his limit, challenged him, shouting that he'd starve following a broken man. The boy's scream shook the house, his eyes fading last as he vanished. From that moment, Marcus's life shifted. Courts reopened, he gained custody, sold his house, and started his new job. The boy never returned, as if his departure lifted a curse, leaving Marcus to wonder if he'd been haunted or hunted. Years later, telling his wife, Marcus reflected on the boy's presence. Was it a spirit feeding on his despair, or a projection of his fractured mind? The truth eluded him, but the boy's absence marked a turning point, a shadow that left with his darkest days. During sleep paralysis, the boy's voice offered to help Marcus win. One night, though, I definitely got sleep paralysis, and I could see him in the corner of my room. But his voice was in my ear, telling me that he'd help me win. Just take him to have fun. Marcus resisted, recalling Buddhist teachings against spirits. I fought it off and got free, and eventually fell back asleep, growing up being ready-rayed a Thai Buddhist. And having experienced things when I was younger, I knew generally that you aren't supposed to give in to what the spirits want, or test them in any way, as things can get much worse. The next day, he won $40,000 at Baccarat. That same following day, I hit a $40,000 run on the Baccarat table that happened fairly quickly too. I couldn't bet a single hand wrong. I doubled down every time. In fact, we were to 1,000 and to 2,000 to 4,000 to 8,000 and so on. The boy grinned at his door, taking credit. It was a huge rush, but I went home and there he was. Again, by the front door this time, grinning ear to ear, like he was taking credit for it or something. But the next day, Marcus lost everything. Seeing the boy laugh. Anyway, the next day I went again, and I got up to about 17,500, betting 1,500 at a time, and I saw the little boy laughing at me in the distance. It was then that I lost everything in 4 hands trying to recover everything from the first lost hand. And eventually, I just left in a rage. He considered returning but argued with his girlfriend, staying home. I had attorney fees to pay for, and really, I could have just used that money on that I was contemplating, deeply grabbing more cash and going back to try and win it back. But I had an argument with my girlfriend from San Jose about not spending enough time together, and it stopped me from going anywhere. That night, Marcus confronted the boy. The little boy appeared again in the darkness when I was in bed, about to go to sleep that night, and ignoring everything that I had learned growing up. It was that night that I challenged him. Gambling had me double down on him, and I told him that if he was going to be following me around like this, then he's going to be stuck with me, that he's going to be miserable. Do I look like the type of person that has anything to offer you? You're going to starve. Following me around, the boy's scream was deafening, shaking the house as he faded. And it was at that very moment that I was done yelling at this dead kid. It's like he understood exactly what I said, and clearly it wasn't what he wanted. He let out a huge, ear-piercing scream, and honestly it felt like it shook the house, and he just faded away. His eyes were the last thing to go. He never appeared again. After that, I never saw him again, and haven't experienced anything paranormal since then, too. Life improved swiftly. Courts reopened. Marcus gained custody, sold his house, and started work. In the following weeks, the courts started opening back up in personal litigation and all that. And I got a court order to get my son. Things got into motion towards finalizing the divorce with his mom, and I ended up listing the house for sale for us to split the money instead of buying her out. I moved and I started work at my new hospital and was finally able to focus on working and spending time with my son. He ended his relationship with his girlfriend. I split with my ex-girlfriend that I was dating at the time also. The boy's departure seemed to lift his burdens. It's like everything bad had just gone away all of a sudden and left with that little boy. Marcus shared the story only with his wife, fearing disbelief. I never mentioned a word of this to anyone else besides my wife, just because we joked about my divorce and wishing that we had met during the pandemic, when people were forced to stay home together. I opened up to her about what kind of year that was for me. He lacked proof, but felt no need to lie. I obviously don't have any proof to show that this has actually happened. Maybe that's why I don't really speak about it too. But I mean, I have no reason to lie about it, or even draft up this long-winded storyline with so much background information. Reflecting, he believed he was haunted, not merely burdened by stress. Looking back, I'm realizing that maybe I was being haunted by something for whatever reason. But when it was happening, it just didn't feel that way. I mean, sure, there were moments I jumped or was startled, but the way that I was reacting to it, it felt like I was being burdened, not haunted. If that makes any sense. In any case, I'm glad that it's all over now. The experience, real or not, was unique. I don't know really why any of this happened. I mean, I was under a lot of pressure at the time, so who knows? Maybe it was in my head, but still, the whole thing felt very real to me. And I've never had anything happen like this ever again, or previously, so I don't know. I don't think it was psychosis or anything, I said. Looking back on it all, I really do believe that I was being haunted. Marcus rebuilt his life, focusing on his son and new family. But the boy's memory lingered, a reminder of a time when despair invited something dark to follow him, a shadow that vanished when he reclaimed his strength. The vanishing Camaro. The night was a black curtain, the back road a ribbon twisting through its folds. My Jeep's rumble, the only sound. I was in my beat-up Jeep Wrangler, rolling home from my girlfriend's house. It's pitch dark on this twisty back road. The forest loomed left, a Christmas tree farm right, their shadows swallowing the stars. With forest on my left and a Christmas tree farm on my right. The road is pretty narrow and has very little shoulder. I pushed the gas, too fast. The curve's a thrill I chased. I'm going way faster than I should be. Headlights carved the dark, gravel crunching under tires. The world mine alone. Then, a bend revealed a gray Camaro, black stripes gleaming, parked sideways, blocking the road. When I come around the next bend, and there's a gray Camaro with black racing stripes parked completely sideways. Its headlights stabbed into the tree farm. A man in a leather jacket leaning against it. Cigarette glowing. There's this guy, leather jacket and jeans, slicked back salt and pepper hair, leaned back casually on the side of the car, smoking a cigarette. My pulse spiked. The scene wrong. His casual pose a mask in the night's eerie quiet. The Camaro's glare burned my eyes. Its driver's silhouette, a threat cloaked in calm. The road a trap. Looks like maybe an SS from the 70s, but it's hard to say. Blocking nearly the full width of the road, I hit the brakes, tires screeching, slowing to a crawl. I slammed my brakes and managed to bring it to a slow roll. The man's cigarette flared, his face half lit, salt and pepper hair slicked back, eyes hidden. I'm too trusting of a person, so I think, oh wow, must be having some car trouble. I thought, car trouble? Maybe he needs help. I'll roll my window down and pull up to see if he needs help. My hand reached for the window, but he moved, tossing the cigarette. Sparks scattering before I can even start rolling my window down. This dude tosses his cigarette to the ground. He walked straight at me, not to the side, not conversational, but into my headlights. Furious, full on starts walking at me, straight into my headlights, straight at my still moving Wrangler, and he looks furious. His stride was deliberate, rage in every step, the night's silence shattering. I froze, my trust betrayed. The road no longer safe. His fury was a storm, his approach a blade. The Camaro's lights a spotlight on my fear. At this point, I'm like, all right, forget this. He's either angry for how fast I was going, or a plain-clothed cop. Was he a cop, a vigilante, or something worse? So I gun it and yanked the wheel over, jumping off into the grass on the side of the road. I floored it, yanking the wheel, the Jeep lurching onto the grass, whip around the tail of his car. Tires tore earth, the Camaro's tail lights blinding, a red glow flooding my cabin. I distinctly recall for some reason the tail lights feeling extremely bright as I passed this angry red. I swerved back onto the road, heart pounding, checking the rear view. Eventually, I pull back up on the road and check my rear view, afraid that I'd hit him. Nothing. No car. No man. No lights. Just darkness. There's nothing. No car. No man. No illumination on the tree farm. Nothing. The road stretched empty, the bend still in sight. My tracks in the grass proof I hadn't imagined it. The night swallowed the scene, leaving only my fear. The man's rage a ghost in my mind. The empty road mocked me, its silence a lie. The Camaro's absence a riddle I couldn't grasp. I do stop. I pull over, and I get out thinking that I must have gone further than I thought. I pulled over, legs shaky, stepping into the cool air. This is definitely the curve. I've only made it about another 50 feet, if that. The curve was there, my tire tracks clear, both where I veered off and returned. In fact, I can see my torn up tracks in the grass from where I went, both where I got back on the road and where I went off initially. No Camaro, no cigarette butt, no sign of him. To this day, I wish I had the sense to go back and check for that cigarette butt or anything, any sign of him. I scanned the tree farm, its shadows still, the forest beyond unmoving. My breath caught, the night too quiet, as if it had erased him. I wanted to search, to prove he was real, but fear held me back. The road felt alive, watching, its curves hiding secrets I wasn't ready to face. The Jeep's engine hummed, a lifeline in the void. But the man's face burned in my memory. I was way too creeped out at that point, so in the end, I got back in my Jeep, and I got out of there. I climbed back in, hands trembling, and drove. The road's twists a maze I fled, afraid that he might be after me now or just plain afraid. Who knows? I checked the rear view, expecting headlights, his furious stride, but only darkness followed. There's nothing. No car. No man. No illumination on the tree farm. Nothing. The night was a wait, each mile a question. What was he? A ghost? A trick? A threat? I told my girlfriend. Her eyes wide. Her theories wild. Haunted roads. Drifters. My imagination. I searched online. Forums for late-night encounters. Finding tales of vanishing cars. Angry strangers. None matched. But their chill lingered. The Camaro's red glow, his rage, haunted my drives. The road forever changed. A shadow I couldn't outrun. The road's silence was a scar. The Camaro's absence a wound I couldn't close. To this day, I wish I had the sense to go back and check for that cigarette butt, or anything. Any sign of him. I drove home. The night's grip unrelenting. His furious face a shadow in my mind. I was way too creeped out at that point. I told friends. Their theories. Ghosts. Drifters. Echoing my own. I got back in my Jeep, and I got out of there. I avoided that road. Its curves a warning. My nights forever cautious. Afraid that he might be after me now. Or just plain afraid, who knows? The Camaro, his rage, became a story I carried, a mystery unsolved, the road's secret mine to keep. The watcher in the alley. The alley behind the bar was a world apart, its shadows thick with secrets, the air heavy with a silence that whispered of unseen eyes. My shifts at the bar often ended with a trip to the back, hauling trash to the secluded lot, where the alley twisted into darkness. I work at a bar that has a back alley that then leads into a small secluded parking lot. The place was littered with trash cans, big ones hulking like sentinels, smaller ones scattered like afterthoughts. There are several large trash cans and many small ones there too. It was a haunt for the lost. Folks digging through refuse or asking for spare change. Usually harmless. There are some addicts, homeless folks, etc. who will come to the alley pretty often. Usually. They're pretty harmless and just look through the trash or ask for $1. I'd grown used to their presence, their rustling a familiar rhythm against the bar's hum. But sometimes they aren't. Tonight, though, the alley felt different. Its quiet, not peaceful but predatory. The shadows sharper, as if they knew something I didn't. I hefted a trash bag, the back door creaking shut behind me, and stepped into a night that seemed to hold its breath. The alley wasn't just dark, it was alive. Its corners bending in ways they shouldn't, the air humming with intent. I moved toward the largest trash can, the one by the door I always used, my boots crunching on gravel. I went out to the back to throw out a bag of trash. A flicker of movement caught my eye. A man, moving fast past the cans, his steps too purposeful for a scavenger. I noticed a man walking quickly by the father's group of garbage cans from the back door, which also happens to be the one that I use. He glanced my way, his face half hidden in shadow. Unaware I could see him. He looked in my direction. I don't think that he knew that I could see him. As I approached, bag swinging, he froze, then slipped into the dark behind the cans, his movements silent, deliberate. As he saw me walking toward him and the trash can, he quickly and quietly hid himself in the dark behind the trash cans. My heart lurched. He was hiding, waiting, and I was alone. I didn't see where he ended up, but it scared me a lot. I mean, I was the only one around. The darkness wasn't empty. It was a trap. The alley's walls closing in. The man's intent to wait on my chest. I stopped, the trash bag heavy in my hand, my pulse loud in my ears. I knew that he was hiding there because I would have seen him walk past if not, and it was the only way to go. The alley had one exit. He hadn't passed me, so he was there, crouched, watching. So really he was hiding there, waiting for me to do well. I don't want to think about that. I scanned the shadows, the cans looming like barriers, their metal glinting faintly. A strange mark caught my eye, a crude spiral scratched into the largest can, fresh and deep, as if carved with force. It hadn't been there before, its edges raw, almost pulsing. Fear gripped me, not just of the man, but of the alley itself. Its space warped, the spiral a sign of something more than human malice. I wanted to drop the bag and run, but my feet felt rooted, the air thick, urging me to stay. The alley's hum wasn't just silence, it was a voice, low and insistent, daring me to step closer to the cans. I shook off the trance, the spiral's pull fading as survival kicked in. I left my bag of trash right there where it was, and I immediately walked back inside. I backed away, my eyes fixed on the cans, expecting the man to lunge, but only silence followed. I hoped that he left soon after I went back in. The door slammed behind me, the bar's noise a jarring return to reality. But my hands shook as I locked it. I would hate to see somebody get hurt. Inside, I told no one. My coworkers would laugh, and the boss would shrug it off. But the spiral stayed with me. Its shape burned into my mind. A warning or an invitation. I checked the cameras later, but the alley feed was static, a gray haze where the cans should be. The next shift, the trash bag was gone. The spiral too. The can's surface smooth, as if never touched. The alley felt normal again, but I knew it wasn't. It had shown me its face, and I'd walked away. I avoided the alley after that, volunteering for front-of-house duties, my nights free of trash runs, but not of fear. The bar's bustle couldn't erase the memory of that man, his hidden gaze, or the spiral's unnatural pull. I began noticing small things, a hum in the bar's quiet moments, like the alley's voice, or scratches on my keys I didn't make. I wondered if he'd been human, or something else, drawn to the alley's dark heart. I asked around, casually, but no one knew of trouble there, though a regular mentioned whispers of a figure seen at dusk, always near the cans, never approaching. I left the job soon after, the alley's shadow too heavy to bear. Driving past now, I see the lot, empty but watchful, its cans silent sentinels. The spiral haunts me, a mark of a place where intent lingers, waiting for someone else to step into its trap, to meet the watcher who never leaves. The girl in the yellow sundress. I lived in the Clayton neighborhood on New York. The old brick duplex was a relic of the 1920s, patched with tacky 1970s updates. Think mustard yellow linoleum and wood paneling that creaked with every step. But the moment I moved in, I felt it. A stillness in the air, like the house was waiting for something. The place was small, just 900 square feet, with a narrow hallway splitting 2 bedrooms and a bathroom so tiny you could barely turn around. At night, the street outside roared with sirens, their red and blue lights flashing through the windows like a warning. I got blackout curtains to block them out, but the unease lingered. Something about the house felt alive, watching, its walls holding secrets I couldn't yet name. As a recently divorced man with 50-50 custody, my bank account dictated my residence. I shared the space with my 5-year-old daughter, Lily, who struggled with the back and forth between her mom's place and mine. My daughter and I had rooms on either end of the 10-foot narrow hallway. with the world's smallest full bathroom splitting the distance. The unfinished basement was a damp, spider-filled void we only used for laundry. But the house had a way of making you feel like you weren't alone, even when you were. Lily often woke up scared, claiming something in her room made noises. She would frequently climb into bed halfway through the night because something had woken her up, and she was scared. I'd feel her clamber over me, elbows, knees all clumsy and warm, settling against my side. One night, I jolted awake, my shirt tugged hard, pulling me sideways. I felt her, but this time not crawling into the bed, but crawling out. The movement was wrong, deliberate, not Lily's usual scramble. I felt her tug my shirt, pulling me to the side to crawl out of the door, and I don't know why the change in direction woke me up, but it gave me an uneasy feeling. My heart thudded, and I rolled over, reaching for her. I murmured something like, "Kiddo, do you need to go to the bathroom?" But as I turned to grab her, I felt nothing. My arms folded into each other. The bed was empty except for me. My eyes snapped open, and there, in the doorway, stood a girl. Not Lily. I saw her standing in the doorway, but that was when I realized that it wasn't her. She was about Lily's age, wearing a yellow sundress with white flowers, her face lit by a soft, playful smirk. I can still remember the face, close to my daughter's age, a slight smirk, innocent and playful. She wore a yellow sundress with white flowers. She's burned into my memory, but not in a frightening way, I suppose. I turned to check on Lily. She was snoring, curled up on her side of the bed. I turned to look at my daughter, passed out cold, snoring on the side. I whipped my head back to the doorway, but the girl was gone. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest, and I knew this wasn't a dream. I've told that story a million times, and it wasn't the last experience that I had there. And the little girl certainly wasn't the only person that I saw. The encounter haunted me, not because it was terrifying, but because it was so real. I felt my shirt being tugged. I felt the weight on my chest, which means that it wasn't a dream. It was a physical experience. I started noticing other things. Footsteps in the hallway when Lily was asleep. A faint giggle from the basement stairs. The house seemed to hum at night, a low, steady pulse that wasn't from the street outside. I dug into its history, asking neighbors about the duplex. An old woman down the block said a family had lived here decades ago. Their daughter lost to a fever in the 1940s. Her description matched the girl I'd seen. Yellow dress, white flowers, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Lily started drawing pictures, crayon sketches of a girl in a yellow dress, standing in doorways or at the foot of her bed. She said the girl wanted to play, but only at night, when the house was quiet. I didn't know what to say. I stopped letting Lily sleep in my room, hoping the distance would keep her safe, but the house had other plans. Objects moved. Keys on the counter one day, in the basement the next. The bathroom mirror fogged up without a shower running. And once, I swear I saw that smirk reflected in it. I felt like the house was toying with us, like it wanted us to know we weren't alone. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was stress, the divorce, the sleepless nights. Honestly, I felt like I was losing my mind for some time after that. But the physicality of it, the tug, the weight, kept me from dismissing it. I hadn't told anyone yet. It wasn't a way that I could share it and not make it sound like I was just dreaming. I confided in a coworker who suggested a medium. She came to the house, her face paling as she stepped inside. She said the girl wasn't malicious, just lonely, tied to the house by a tragedy she couldn't escape. She warned me not to acknowledge her too much. Attention would make her stronger. We moved out a year later, when I could afford it. The duplex felt heavier as we packed, like it knew we were leaving. The last night, I woke to that hum again, louder, vibrating through the walls. Lily's drawings were scattered across her floor, all of the same girl, her crayon smile sharper now. I burned them in the backyard, watching the flames curl around that yellow dress. The medium's words stuck with me. Don't give her attention. But I still see her sometimes, in new places, standing in doorways, that smirk flickering in the dark. The duplex is still there, rented to someone new. I wonder if they feel the hum, if they've seen her too, waiting in the shadows for someone to notice. The playful spirit. The house was a relic. Its creaking floors and peeling walls, a testament to years forgotten. I stood in the living room, the stink of hockey gear clinging to me. The night silence broken only by the hum of a fan struggling against Denver's heat. My daughter, Lou, slept upstairs. Her room a sanctuary I guarded fiercely. But the air was wrong tonight, charged with a static that prickled my skin. Something was here, something that knew we were home, and it wasn't letting go. I'd come back from a late game, my body aching, my mind heavy with the weight of single fatherhood. The house was supposed to be a refuge, a place to raise Lou, but its shadows held secrets, whispers that lingered in the dark. My mom had been here, watching Lou, her presence a comfort. But her words as I walked in were a jolt. Something about a weird night, a razor buzzing, a giggle in the hall. I wanted to dismiss it, to cling to reason, but the truth was clawing at me. A memory of a little girl I'd seen, a playful spirit that wouldn't rest. The hallway stretched before me, its dim light flickering. The stairs to the basement a black maw that swallowed sound. I'd felt it before, a hum like standing near power lines, a presence that wasn't mine or Lou's. The house was old, its bones groaning, but this was different. A life, a curiosity, a force that moved through the walls. I checked on Lou, her small form peaceful. But the giggle my mom heard wasn't hers, and the footsteps weren't ours. I sat on the couch, my mom's book still open, her words echoing in my mind. The razor, the giggle, the running. They weren't coincidence, weren't the heat or the house settling. I'd seen her, a little girl in a sundress, her laughter a flicker in the dark, her presence a game I didn't understand. The house was alive, its energy a pulse that matched my own, a call I couldn't ignore, a truth I wasn't ready to face. The night pressed against the windows, its heat unrelenting, the fans a futile defense. I wanted to believe it was my mind, a trick born of exhaustion, but the girl was real. Her playfulness, a shadow that danced in the corners. I'd felt her before, a tug on my bed, a ball bouncing, a giggle that wasn't Lou's. The house was hers, and we were guests, caught in her game, her curiosity a mirror to my daughter's, a spirit that wanted to play. As a single dad needed help with my daughter on the late weeknights, my mom offered to come over and watch her while I played. It was a lifeline, a chance to lose myself in hockey, to escape the weight of the house. When I got home at around 11, my mom was in the living room reading a book. She walked over to me and almost hugged me until this stink of the hockey gear caught up to her. Her face was troubled, her words careful. I still remember her looking at me and saying it was kind of a weird night. I put my keys on the table and asked her what she meant. She hesitated, then spoke of the razor buzzing in the bathroom, a sound she couldn't explain. She said, "Well, your electric razor turned on in the bathroom a few times." I chalked it up to just a weird coincidence, but then she said, "And I kept getting up to check on Lou." It was weird because I thought I was hearing her run up and down the hallway, and I could have sworn that I heard her giggle, but every time that I got up to check on her, the door was closed and she was asleep. The words hit like a punch, a confirmation of what I'd feared. I didn't tell her about that night, too honestly. I didn't want to admit it to myself because it meant the night before, the little girl, that it was all real. I'd seen her, a flicker in the hall, a sundress with flowers, her laughter a call to play, a truth I couldn't deny. The house was hers, and she wasn't alone. Her playful spirit alight in the dark, but something heavier lingered, watching, waiting. A shadow I couldn't name. The house wasn't just old, it was a vessel, its walls holding more than dust and memory. I've since moved in with my girlfriend in a house that feels quiet and calm sitting outside. Now it's a lot easier to process through everything. But that house, that summer, was a crucible, its heat and silence a stage for the unseen. The summer in Denver is warmer than most people think, and this house had no air conditioning. Even with fans, it was easy to climb up to 0 inside, with even the best fan setup. The swelter was oppressive, the fans a futile hum against the thick air. Each night, a battle to sleep, to think, to stay grounded. I thought that I was having some type of, I don't know, like fever or heat-induced experience. I bought several swamp cooler-style fans, and while I felt comfortable temp-wise, it definitely didn't help. I clung to reason, desperate for answers, testing for carbon monoxide, black mold, anything to explain the hum, the giggles, the girl. My next thought was carbon monoxide or black mold, or something. I became obsessed with trying to find out why I was hearing, seeing, and feeling things. But in the end, I couldn't find an answer, and nothing helped. The house defied logic. Its energy a pulse I couldn't escape, a static that clung to me in the hallway, the kitchen, the stairs. That summer, too, was a cluster of experiences I can't recall each one in order, because it was easily weekly. Sometimes almost a daily feeling, in fact. The main feeling, though, was what I could only describe as, I don't know, like static energy. It was like standing near a power line, a buzz that wasn't sound but sensation, a life that moved through the walls. I tried to explain it to people like standing next to one of those electrical towers. It wasn't audible, but I could feel it walking in the hallway in my bedroom and the kitchen steps down to the basement. The basement stairs were the worst, their creaks a chorus, their darkness a maw that held secrets I didn't want to know. The basement steps. They were old and creaky, and initially I would think that it was the house settling, and to a degree it probably was the case. However, there were two very specific instances that it was not the case. One night, brushing my teeth, I heard a ping-pong ball bounce in the kitchen, a steady rhythm that echoed down the stairs. One night, I was brushing my teeth, and I heard my cat's ping-pong ball bouncing in the kitchen and down the steps. This happened 3 times, a steady bounce, bounce, bounce on the tile floors, and then a hit off the wall leading down the steps, bouncing down one stair and hitting the door to the backyard. I called out, blaming the cat, but she was in Lou's room, lounging, untouched by the ball's dance. After the 3rd time, I called out to my cat to knock it off, and I remember so vividly sticking my head out of the door and looking into the kitchen, and there was my cat, not in the kitchen, but laying in my daughter's room in a very cat-like pose of not caring. The house played tricks. It sounds a game, its energy a call to notice. I'd walk the hall, feeling her, the girl in the sundress, her laughter a flicker, her presence a tug at my sleeve. Lou slept through it, her innocence a shield, but I couldn't. My nights fractured by footsteps, by balls, by books flipping on their own. I'd check on her, her small form peaceful, but the house wasn't. Its pulse a rhythm I couldn't ignore, a truth I couldn't deny. I tried to debunk it, to find a reason, but the house was relentless, its energy a constant, a hum that grew with each night. The girl was playful, her giggles a child's joy, but there was something else, a heavier presence, a shadow that lingered in the basement, the stairs, the quiet. I'd feel it, a weight in the air, a chill that wasn't heat, a truth that made me question my sanity, my safety, my home. The house was hers, and we were guests, caught in her game, her curiosity a mirror to lose, a spirit that wanted to play, but not alone. The house's pulse was relentless, a hum that wove through every room, every night, a call I couldn't silence. On another occasion, I was working from home and had my computer set up in my dining room again. Then in shotgun fashion, the house basically was a straight line from the back door to the front door. My desk faced the front window, the back stairs visible, their creaks a constant in my mind. I was on a team call with an employee, and that's when I heard footsteps running up and down the back stairs. The sound was clear, playful, a child's scamper that broke my focus. I had to tell my employee to give me a second. I leaned back and told the cat to knock it off and look back at the screen. When my face went white, I froze, my eyes catching my cat, lounging on the couch, untouched by the stairs' dance. I had noticed my cat again, in a very casual pose, sitting on the couch in the main room. The footsteps echoed, audible to my colleague, their rhythm a validation of my fear. I had told my employees about it, and when this particular one experienced it with me, I felt very validated by this, because the steps were clear enough that they were audible, but quick and playful. It wasn't the cat, wasn't the house, it was her, the girl. Her laughter, a shadow in the air. If it wasn't a cat, then it was something small and curious, and I really don't know how to explain it now. The house was alive, its energy a pulse that matched my own, a game I didn't choose. As more things happened, I started talking about it more generally on the phone, or on team calls if I was in a room, the hallway, or kitchen, and started to talk about the little girl. I could suddenly feel her around me. The air would shift, sounds muting, a tunnel hearing that wrapped me in silence. What this felt like was a sort of quieting of surrounding noises. If you can think about the sensation when you faint, the noise kind of muting, or to a quiet ringing, almost like a tunnel hearing, instead of a tunnel vision. Goosebumps followed, a prickle that spoke of her nearness, an inner radar pointing to the hall, the stairs, the dark. The next sensation would be a classic goosebumps, and then kind of like an inner radar, where I just see a part of the room in my head. A lot of the times it was the hallway, but I just have this feeling of like, hey, look, here. I'd resist, breaking the spell, but the house didn't rest. Its energy a constant, a hum that grew with each mention of her name. All three of those would intensify, and I would have to intentionally say no and walk away to sort of break it off. The nights were worse, my sleep fractured by tugs on my bed, pressures in the dark, a presence that wasn't my cat. I only slept with headphones. There nothing ever felt evil, I guess, but I just couldn't keep up with the constant movement and energy. I banned the cat from my room, testing, but the tugs persisted, her playfulness a weight I couldn't bear. I got to the point where I'd pretty regularly feel a little tug here or a pressure there on my butt. I stopped letting my cat stay in my room to try and bunk that, and it persisted. The house was hers, her laughter a call, her curiosity a mirror to lose, a child's spirit bound to us. I shared it with my mom, her concern a mirror to my own, her stories of giggles and razors a confirmation. She suggested a medium, a friend who saw beyond, but I doubted. My skepticism a shield against the unknown. The house didn't care. Its energy a pulse that grew. Its shadows a stage for her games. Her presence a truth I couldn't deny. I'd walk the hall, feel her, see her in my mind. Her sundress a flicker. Her laughter a call to play. A game I didn't understand. A spirit that wanted me to notice, to join her in the dark. The medium's house was a contrast to mine, its calm a balm against the static that clung to me. I told my mom about all of this, and she, for my birthday, told me about her friend who apparently was a medium. I went, skeptical, guarding my story, my doubt a wall against the unknown. Even with all of my personal experiences, I had serious doubts about this all, and I made sure not to give him any info prior to and told my mom to do the same. We sat, the air heavy with incense, his eyes kind but piercing, a man who saw what I couldn't. When I showed up to his house, though, we sat down and I did a tarot reading, first time I had ever done it. A little cleans and then dowsing rods, too. The rods were limp, their movements feeble, my questions unanswered. This was when my inner skeptic certainly kicked in. I mean, here I was, holding 2 rods, apparently communing with the dead. Nothing happened. I asked about moving, a general plea, but the rods stayed still. I remember him asking me to ask a general question about anything, so I paused and asked if I should leave my house. The rods didn't move, but he looked at me and said, "I want to talk about your house. There's a girl there, isn't there?" I nodded, cautious, mentioning Lou, but he smiled, knowing. I nodded and said, "Yeah, my daughter." And he smirked, "No, duh. You've seen a little girl. She's like a bedroom, a hallway, a stairs, or something very playful." My breath caught. His words a mirror to my nights. Her sundress, a vision he shouldn't see. At that, I remember putting the ding rods down and just asked, "What does she look like to you?" He described her, a homemade sundress, flowers, a child close to Lou's age, playful, not evil. She's not from now. I see her in like a homemade type of sundress. She's probably close in age to your daughter Flowers. I see Flowers. It was her. Perfect. A truth I couldn't deny. She likes to play at night a lot, doesn't she? You have balls that she throws for you, or a pet or something. She's not evil. She just likes having nice people there. Her games were real. Her laughter a call. Her presence a joy bound to the house. She isn't the only one there, too, honestly. Whether I had fully understood it or not, I was at terms with the little girl that I had seen. But there was something else in the house, something older and bigger. His words chilled me. The heavier presence, the shadow in the basement, the weight I'd felt, confirmed. At times, the movement that I heard and the energy that I had felt was different, heavier, and not as playful. He advised me to speak to her, to set boundaries like a parent, to claim my space. He told me that the girl was someone to talk to, basically. To talk to her like a parent if I was over her playing and needed a quiet space. My sensitivity, the tunnel hearing, the radar, it was real. A gift or a curse. As I told him what I experienced with feeling the tunnel hearing, the inner vision of where people were, he told me to be careful. It sounded like I was sensitive, and that thinking was one thing, but talking directly to something, allowing them in, could lead to attachment. The drive home was long, his words a weight, the house waiting, its pulse a call I couldn't ignore. I tried it, speaking to her, setting rules, claiming my nights. The house listened, sometimes, her games pausing, her laughter fading. But the other presence lingered, a shadow I couldn't name. I'd walk the hall, feel her, see her in my mind, her sundress a flicker. But the basement's weight was different, a truth I didn't want to face. Lou slept, her innocence a shield, but I couldn't. My nights a battle against the unseen, a game I didn't choose, a spirit that wanted me to play, a shadow that wanted more. The house's energy was a constant, a hum that pulsed through every room, every night, a call I couldn't silence. I'd learned to speak to her, to set boundaries, but the girl's playfulness was relentless, her laughter a flicker in the dark, her presence a mirror to Lou's curiosity. 2 nights later, I was laying in my bed, and I heard books on my shelf being flipped through. The sound was clear, a steady flick, a child's game in the quiet. At first, I sort of chalked it up to the fan, but after about 5 minutes of the noise, I turned the fan off, and it kept going like somebody flicking through books. I sat up, my phone's flashlight cutting through the gloom, searching for her, for proof. I sat up quickly 2 or 3 times, flashing my phone's flashlight to try and catch something. But there was nothing. The shelves were still, the books untouched, but the sound persisted, a defiance of reason. After one more attempt, I turned off the flashlight, and I sat of my bed and said, "I need to go to bed now, and I need you to be quiet in here. Please go to bed." My voice was firm, a parent's command, and the sensations hit. Tunnel hearing, goosebumps, her presence in the hall. All the sensations suddenly hid me, the quiet noise, the goosebumps, seeing where she was. And then it was quiet, and stayed quiet. After that, I said thank you, and then I fell asleep. The silence was a gift, a pause in her games, a proof that she listened, that I could claim my space. But the house wasn't hers alone. Its shadows holding something heavier, a presence that lingered in the basement, the stairs, the quiet. I'd feel it, a weight in the air, a chill that wasn't heat, a truth that made me question my sanity, my safety, my home. The girl was playful, her giggles a child's joy, but the other was different. A shadow that watched, a force I didn't want to name. I shared my story, cautious, with friends, with colleagues, their skepticism a mirror to my own. The house didn't care. Its energy a pulse that grew, its shadows a stage for her games, her presence a truth I couldn't deny. I'd walk the hall, feel her, see her in my mind, her sundress a flicker. But the basement's weight was a warning, a truth I couldn't face. Lou slept, her innocence a shield, but I couldn't. My nights a battle against the unseen, a game I didn't choose. I researched spirits, seeking answers in old tales, finding stories of children bound to homes, of shadows that lingered for reasons unknown. The girl fit the mold. Her playfulness, a child's joy. Her presence, a light in the dark. But the other was different. A weight that didn't belong. A truth tied to the house's past. Its history, a puzzle I couldn't solve. The medium's words echoed. His warning a guide. His vision of her sundress a confirmation. But the heavier presence was a mystery. A shadow I couldn't name, I tried to protect Lou, to keep her from the games, from the shadows, but she'd smile, her laughter a mirror to the girls, her innocence a bridge between worlds. The house was theirs, a playground for the unseen, a stage for their dance, a truth I couldn't deny. I'd check on her, her small form peaceful, but the house wasn't. Its pulse a rhythm I couldn't ignore, a call to notice, to play, to face the dark. The nights were a battle, my sleep fractured by tugs, by sounds, by her presence, her games a constant, her laughter a call. I'd speak to her, set rules, claim my space. But the house was relentless, its energy a hum that grew, its shadows a stage for her joy, her curiosity a mirror to lose. The other presence lingered, a weight I couldn't shake, a truth I didn't want to know, a shadow that watched, waiting, a force that wasn't hers, a mystery that haunted me still. The house's games didn't stop, its pulse a constant, a hum that wove through every night, every room, a call I couldn't silence. I'd learned to live with her, the girl in the sundress, her laughter a flicker in the dark, her presence a child's joy bound to the house, but the other was different. A weight that lingered, a shadow that didn't play, a truth I couldn't face. I'd walk the hall, feel her, see her in my mind. But the basement's creaks were heavier, its darkness a maw that held secrets I didn't want to know. I tried to ground myself, to focus on Lou, on hockey, on life. But the house was relentless, its energy a hum that grew with each night. I'd check on Lou, her small form peaceful, her room a sanctuary I guarded fiercely. But the giggles weren't hers, the footsteps weren't ours. The girl was real, her playfulness a light in the dark, but the other was a shadow, a weight that pressed against me, a truth I couldn't deny. I shared my story, cautious, with my mom, her concern a mirror to my own, her tales of razors and giggles a confirmation. She'd felt it too, the house's pulse, the girl's joy, the shadow's weight. We spoke of moving, of leaving the house behind. But it wasn't simple. Not with Lou, not with life. The house was ours, for now. Its games a constant, its shadows a stage for her dance. A truth we couldn't escape. I researched the house's past, seeking answers in old records, finding fragments of its history, a family, a loss, a child who didn't leave. The girl fit the mold, her sundress a memory, her laughter a call to play. But the other was older, a presence tied to the land, to the house's bones. A truth I couldn't name. The medium's words echoed, his vision of her flowers, her joy. But his warning was clear. The other was different. A shadow I shouldn't invite, a force I shouldn't face. I tried to protect Lou, to keep her from the games, from the shadows. But she'd laugh, her joy a mirror to the girls, her innocence a bridge between worlds. I'd watch her play, her toys scattered, her laughter a call, and wonder if she felt her, if she saw her, if she knew. The house was theirs, a playground for the unseen, a stage for their dance. A truth I couldn't deny. I'd check on her, her small form peaceful. But the house wasn't. Its pulse a rhythm I couldn't ignore. The nights were a battle, my sleep fractured by sounds, by tugs, by her presence, her games a constant, her laughter a call to play. I'd speak to her, set rules, claim my space. But the house was relentless, its energy a hum that grew, its shadows a stage for her joy, her curiosity a mirror to lose. The other presence lingered, a weight I couldn't shake, a truth I didn't want to know, a shadow that watched, waiting, a force that wasn't hers. I tried to live with it, to accept her, to coexist, but the house was too much, its pulse too loud, its shadows too deep. I'd walk the hall, feel her, see her in my mind, her sundress a flicker. But the basement's weight was a warning, a truth I couldn't face. I'd check on Lou, her small form peaceful, but the house wasn't. Its pulse a rhythm I couldn't ignore, a call to notice, to play, to face the dark. The house was a crucible, its heat and silence a stage for the unseen, a truth I couldn't escape. I'd learned to speak to her, to set boundaries, but the girl's playfulness was relentless, her laughter a call, her presence a child's joy bound to us. The other was different, a shadow that lingered, a weight I couldn't name, a truth that haunted me still, a mystery I'd carry forever, a spirit that wanted me to play, a force that wanted more. The house's hold didn't fade, its pulse a constant, a hum that wove through every night, every room, a call I couldn't silence. I'd learned to live with her, the girl in the sundress, her laughter a flicker in the dark, her presence a child's joy, bound to the house. But the other was different, a weight that lingered, a shadow that didn't play, a truth I couldn't face. I'd walk the hall, feel her, see her in my mind, but the basement's creaks were heavier, its darkness a maw that held secrets I didn't want to know. I moved, finally, to a new house with my girlfriend, its calm a balm against the static that had clung to me. I've since moved in with my girlfriend in a house that feels quiet and calm sitting outside. Now it's a lot easier to process through everything. The old house was gone, its walls left behind, but its memories lingered, a tapestry of fear and wonder I couldn't unravel. I'd check on Lou, her small form peaceful, her laughter free of shadows, but the girl's giggles echoed in my mind, her sundress a flicker, her presence a truth I couldn't deny. I shared my story, cautious, with those who'd listen, their skepticism a mirror to my own. But the house was real, its energy a pulse I'd felt, its shadows a stage for her games. I'd researched spirits, finding tales of children bound to homes, of shadows that lingered for love or loss. But the girl was mine, her joy a light, her curiosity a call. The other was different, a weight I couldn't name, a truth tied to the house's past, a mystery I'd never solve. I tried to protect Lou, to keep her from the games, from the shadows. But she'd smile, her laughter a mirror to the girls, her innocence a bridge between worlds. I'd watch her play, her toys scattered, her joy a call, and wonder if she felt her, if she saw her, if she knew. The new house was quiet, its air free of static, its nights a gift, but the old house lingered, its pulse a rhythm I couldn't forget, a truth I'd carry forever. I didn't return to that house, its shadows too deep, its memories too vivid. The basement's creaks, the hallway's hum, the girl's laughter, they were hers, a stage for her watch, a place where fear and wonder met. I carried her with me, a memory of sundress and flowers, a truth that shaped me, a father caught in the dark, a witness to the unknown. The world was bigger now, its mysteries vast, but she was mine, a playful spirit, a presence I'd never forget. The medium's words stayed with me, his warning a guide, his vision of her flowers, her joy, a confirmation. I'd learned to speak to her, to set boundaries, to claim my space. But the other was different, a shadow I hadn't faced, a truth I hadn't named. The house was a portal, a place where the veil was thin, where she found us, her laughter a call, her presence a game. I'd played, unwillingly, a father caught in her joy, her curiosity a mirror to lose, a spirit that wanted to play, a shadow that wanted more. I found peace in the new house, its calm a gift, its nights a rest. But the old house lingered, its pulse a rhythm I couldn't ignore. I'd check on Lou, her small form peaceful, her laughter free, but the girl's giggles echoed, her sundress a flicker, her presence a truth I couldn't deny. The house was hers, and we were guests, caught in her game, her joy a light, her curiosity a call, a spirit that wanted me to notice, to play, to face the dark. The new house is quiet, its nights a gift, but the old house lingers, its shadows a memory, its pulse a truth I carry. The girl is out there, her laughter a call, her sundress a flicker, a playful spirit I'll never forget. The other is there too, a weight I didn't name, a mystery I left behind, a truth that haunts me still, a dance of light and shadow, a game I didn't choose. The vanished night. The living room felt alive with a strange pulse, the air thick as if holding its breath, pressing against the walls. I sat with my best friend Kay, the TV's glow casting shadows as we watched a movie, our laughter a fragile shield against the night. The house was quiet, her mom and sister asleep down the hall, but a chill crept up my spine, not from the cold, but from a presence I couldn't see. Something unseen stirred, its intent weaving through the stillness, waiting to unravel our reality. The movie droned on, a backdrop to the growing unease, when the room shifted, subtle, like a dream blurring at the edges. Kay nudged me, her eyes wide, as a faint hum vibrated through the floor, too low to be the TV. The house seemed to tilt, the walls pulsing with a rhythm that wasn't ours, as if time itself was bending. My heart raced, a sense of being watched growing stronger. The darkness beyond the windows alive with a threat we couldn't name. The night was no longer ours. It belonged to something else. I reached for the remote, my hand trembling, when a sensation hit. Sharp, disorienting, like the world had skipped a beat. The air crackled, and the room filled with a pressure that pinned us to the couch, our breaths shallow. Kay whispered my name, her voice tight, and I felt it too. A shift, a presence pressing against the edges of our minds. The house was no longer a refuge, it had become a cage, and whatever lurked within was drawing closer, ready to pull us into its grasp. The pressure broke, replaced by a void of silence, and we stumbled to our feet, the movie forgotten. A cold draft swept through, though no window was open, and the hallway stretched impossibly long, its end shrouded in shadow. My pulse thundered as we moved toward Kay's mom's room, the need to escape the living room overwhelming. Something had invaded our night, a force that warped space and time, and we were caught in its web, helpless to resist. The hallway loomed, its walls seeming to lean inward, the air thick with a scent I couldn't place, metallic, ancient. We reached the door, our hands shaking, and pushed it open, expecting safety, but finding only emptiness. The bed was vacant, the sheets untouched, and a low hum returned, vibrating through the floor. The house had swallowed Kay's mom and sister, and now it was turning its gaze on us, a predator playing with its prey before the final strike. August 11th, 2001. It's easy to remember the exact date, because it was the same night as the premiere of Samurai Jack on Cartoon Network. I was 8 years old at the time, and this was a big deal. So of course I had a sleepover with my best friend Kay at her mom's house, but we slept in the living room so that we could watch TV as we fell asleep. I was showing Kay my new favorite movie, Titan AE, and around 3 o'clock, we were woken up by decorative indoor wind chimes. For whatever reason, they were going crazy. Like there were actual wind gusts in the house. At the same time, it sounded like a whole pack of cats fighting in the front yard. The strange awakening drove us to act, our childlike fear pushing us forward. Being children, it freaked us out, and we decided to go tell her mom that we were going to move to the bedroom for the rest of the night. When we opened the door to the room that her mom and 12-year-old sister had been sleeping in, we couldn't see them in the bed. Climbed into the bed and was like, what the heck? There's no one here. So we assumed that they had moved to one of the other bedrooms, but there were 3 after all. So we began the search, but they weren't in any of the rooms. The house felt alive, its rooms shifting, doors locking as if to trap us. We started turning on every light in the house and getting a bit frantic. Doors were locked. Keys were on the rack. Car was in the driveway. Kay was freaking out because she thought her mom's stalker got out of prison and abducted her mom and sister. The panic was a blur, a nightmare we couldn't wake from. Now the next thing that I remember was the sunlight. Was what woke me up, and the next morning we were back on the living room floor as if we had never gotten up. With no memory of going back to sleep, but the weirdest thing is that we both recalled vividly looking for her mom and sister. So naturally, we interrogated them the second that we saw them. The memory of the search was vivid, yet the return to the living room was a gap, a missing piece. Luckily, my bestie's mom is pretty open-minded, and she actually believed that we weren't making it up. And that was pretty strange as well. Her mother to this day continues to recall the details of that day. But unfortunately, my friend has somehow completely forgotten that it happened. The disbelief from others only deepened the mystery. I usually get a bit of a dismissive reaction when I share this story. My husband believes that it was a dream or sleep paralysis, which I have no problem considering. But I mean, come on. It's not that. I do wonder how Kay would forget something that we used to talk about obsessively. As we got older, others have suggested that I ask her mom and sister if they still remember our story. I will soon, but they're dealing with something at the moment, and it would be a bit inappropriate to bother them with this at this stage. But like I said, the last time that I talked to her, she recalled it, and she remembers that night in detail. The night left a mark, a story that shaped my view of reality. The vanishing of Kay's mom and sister, the return to the living room with no memory, felt like a theft of time, a manipulation by something beyond us. My husband's theory of sleep paralysis offered comfort, but the shared memory with Kay, her mother's belief, defied that logic. I often replayed the hum, the empty rooms, wondering if we'd been taken somewhere else, returned altered. The house, once a place of laughter, now held a shadow, a question that lingered in every quiet moment. Kay's forgetfulness haunted me, a disconnect that fueled my obsession. We'd talked about it for years, piecing together the chimes, the search, the emptiness. But now she claimed ignorance, her mind wiped clean. Her mom's detailed recall was a lifeline, a confirmation that we hadn't dreamed it, but the why remained elusive. I imagined a force, perhaps temporal, pulling us into a void, resetting us on the living room floor. The idea that time could bend, that we could be pawns in an unseen game, both terrified and intrigued me. The suggestion to ask Kay's mom and sister again weighed on me. Their current troubles made it untimely, but the urge to validate the memory grew stronger. I pictured the scene, her mom nodding, her sister hesitant, piecing together a night that defied explanation. The chimes, the vanished family, the return without memory. It was a puzzle with no edges, a story that pushed me to question reality itself. The dismissal from others only solidified my resolve. This was no dream, but a glimpse into something beyond. The experience became a cornerstone of my identity, a tale I carried with quiet pride. The living room, the hallway, the empty bed, each became a symbol of that night's mystery. My husband's skepticism faded against my certainty, and Kay's amnesia only deepened the enigma. I found hope in the unknown, a belief that if such a night could happen, then the impossible might hold answers, waiting in the shadows of memory. The whisper of ancestors. The past has a voice, soft but insistent, calling through the years to those who listen. At 26, I stood at the edge of my family's history, puzzled by a gift I couldn't explain. Fluency in Urdu, a language my siblings didn't share. Growing up in America, far from Pakistan's vibrant streets, I'd never heard it spoken enough to learn it naturally. Yet the words flowed from me, as if someone had planted them deep in my soul. My parents rarely used Urdu, saving it for fleeting calls with relatives overseas. Yet I spoke it with ease, a mystery that haunted me. When I asked why, my mother's answer opened a door to the unknown, pulling me into a story that wasn't mine, yet felt like home. The truth came in whispers, in dreams, in a name I'd never heard, but somehow knew. Was it chance, or was something ancient reaching out, guiding me to remember? I asked my parents why I'm the only one out of my siblings that knows Urdu. My mother's eyes softened, her voice tinged with wonder. My mom said that my great-grandpa taught me. I frowned, confused. I had no memory of him. I said that I don't remember him, and she said that he died slightly before she was born. The revelation stunned me. How could a man gone for decades teach me anything? When I was around 2 years old, I had an imaginary friend named the same thing as my great-grandfather from my mother's side. His name, rare and unfamiliar in America, was one I'd never encountered elsewhere. It was a fairly unique name, and growing up in America, I'm sure that I've never heard that name anywhere else before. My mother explained that I'd chatter to this friend in English, and he'd reply in Urdu, teaching me until I was nearly fluent by 3. My mom said that I would talk to him in English allegedly, and he would speak back to me in Urdu until I learned. And I was near fluent by the time that I was 3, mind you. I don't remember any of this. The story felt like a fairy tale, too strange to grasp. But that night, the past found me. I had a dream where I got to meet my great-grandfather. He stood tall, his eyes warm but fierce, speaking in Urdu with a clarity that pierced my heart. He explained to me that he taught me this because he was tired of watching all of his family lose their culture. His voice carried the weight of generations, urging me to hold fast to our roots. I tried speaking back to him, and he was speaking in Urdu, in the dream, which has never happened before to me. I vowed to learn more about our heritage, to weave its threads into my life. I promised him that I would try to learn more about my culture, and asked if he wanted me to tell his family anything from him. He named my youngest uncle, his voice grave. He mentioned my youngest uncle by name, and asked me to tell him not to ride his motorcycle too fast, since that's how his dad died. I woke, heart racing, the dream vivid as reality. I asked my mom how her dad died, and she said that he was in a motorcycle accident when he was driving too quickly. She added that he'd slid under a garbage truck, a detail too precise to be coincidence. I immediately called my uncle after this in Pakistan, and I told him not to drive recklessly. I shared the dream, my great-grandfather's warning, my voice trembling. His grandpa came to me in a dream and explained that to me. My uncle was quiet, his response unclear, but the weight of the message lingered. I don't know what he thought about that, and I don't know what's going on, or how, or why this is happening to me. The experience was surreal, a bridge between worlds I didn't understand. I am absolutely confused and simultaneously amazed by this whole thing. The dream changed me. I began studying Urdu more deeply, diving into Pakistani poetry, music, and traditions. I visited the local mosque, spoke with elders, and collected family stories, each one a piece of the puzzle. But the mystery of my great-grandfather's presence grew. I want to be able to learn more from him and talk to him again, but I don't even know how I would go about it. I tried meditating, keeping a journal by my bed, hoping to summon him in dreams, but he didn't return. Family photos showed his face, kind, resolute, a man who'd carried our culture across oceans. I learned he'd been a scholar, passionate about preserving our heritage. His life cut short before he could pass it on. Was he still here, watching, guiding me to finish his work? Has this ever happened to anybody else? And if it has, don't. What did you do? I shared the story with cousins, hoping for answers, but they had none. Only awe. The house felt different now, its silence alive with echoes of those gone before, and I wondered if I'd hear his voice again, calling me to keep our legacy alive. The faceless visitors. The bedroom was dim, the morning light barely seeping through the curtains as Lena drifted back to sleep, exhausted after seeing her family off. The house in upstate New York was quiet, its familiar creaks absent, replaced by a stillness that felt unnaturally heavy. She was on the edge of dreams when the bedroom door opened, silent and slow, revealing figures that shouldn't exist. 2, maybe 3, humanoid shapes glided in, their movements impossibly swift, their presence chilling the air. Lena's eyes widened, her body frozen as one leaned close, its featureless face inches from hers. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, off-white surface, like tightly wrapped bandages. The creature's form was human but wrong, devoid of any detail that marked life. Lena's mind screamed to move, but darkness swallowed her, time slipping away like water through her fingers. She woke with a start. The room bathed in midday light. Hours had vanished, an impossible gap in her memory. Confusion turned to dread as the image of those beings flooded back, their blank faces etched into her mind, refusing to fade. Lena tried to dismiss it as a dream, but the clarity of their appearance gnawed at her. Were they spirits, aliens, or something else entirely? The house felt different now, as if it held secrets she wasn't meant to know, and Lena began to question her reality. So I had an experience about 10 years ago that I'm still searching for answers about. Lena, a 32-year-old mother, lived in a quiet upstate New York home with her husband and young child. I'm mostly curious to know if anyone else has seen a humanoid, similar to the ones that I'll describe, as I haven't been able to find any accounts describing anything like them in all these years. One morning, after her family left, she returned to bed, exhausted. Early one morning, after my husband and child left for the day, I was tired and went back to bed. As she dozed, the bedroom door opened silently. I have a distinct memory of having been dozing off when the bedroom door which I was facing quietly opened, and 2 or more humanoid creatures entered. They moved with eerie speed, soundless, approaching her bed. They made absolutely no sound and approached me so quickly that I could barely register what was happening. One came close, its face clear in the dim light. All I remember is one approaching close enough to my face to make out how they looked. Then, she blacked out, waking hours later. Next thing that I know, I'm waking up in my bed, and over 3 hours had passed, which I remember just didn't feel possible. The time loss baffled her, and the memory of the beings returned vividly. I also remember the beings right away, because I was so baffled at how it had gotten so late in the day. But after a few minutes, I remembered what I'd seen before falling asleep, and was instantly filled with just dread and confusion. Lena tried to convince herself it was a dream state, but the details were too sharp. I almost instantly started gaslighting myself about it, convinced that it was just a simple case of being in and out of dream state. But I still remember what these things look like and feel confused about it to this day. The beings were off-white, featureless, like mummies wrapped in tight bandages, with no eyes, nose, or mouth, just smooth, unsettling surfaces. Here's how I would describe these things. They were a light off-white color, with absolutely no distinguishing features. No eyes, ears, nose, genitals, nipples, hair. Nothing, just average. Male height, average. Male build, while humanoids with skin or some type of outer covering that looked almost like, I don't know, like wide white, ace, bandaging or something. Basically, like a tightly and freshly wrapped mummy almost. But there was their skin. I'm assuming that it was their skin. At least, perhaps they were disguised. Their lack of eyes was particularly disturbing. Not even slits in their skin-like covering. The craziest thing to me, though, is still how they simply had no eyes. Not even slits in their fabric-like skin. Lena had encountered the supernatural before, but this was different, hinting at abduction. I will add here that this is not my first encounter with the otherworldly. It is the one that has baffled me the most, and the one that makes me wonder if maybe I've been abducted. She searched for similar accounts but found none, leaving her isolated in her confusion. So can anyone relate to this experience or sighing? Have you ever heard of anything like this or seen anything like this? The house, once a sanctuary, now felt watched, its quiet corners holding an unspoken presence. Lena began noticing subtle changes, objects slightly misplaced, a faint hum in the air at night, as if the beings had left an imprint. She confided in no one, fearing disbelief, but the memory drove her to question her sanity, wondering if her exhaustion had conjured them, or if they were real entities with unknown intent. Days after the incident, Lena's sleep grew restless, plagued by half-formed dreams of blank faces hovering over her. She avoided napping, afraid the door might open again, but the sense of being observed never left. She researched humanoid sightings, hoping for answers, but found nothing matching the bandaged figures. Their silence, their speed, their featureless forms, they defied explanation, existing outside the realm of ghosts or aliens she'd read about. The house's atmosphere shifted, its warmth replaced by a subtle unease. Lena checked locks obsessively, her eyes darting to the bedroom door, expecting it to creak open. Her family noticed her distraction, but she kept silent, guarding the truth of that morning. Months passed, yet the being's image remained vivid, a puzzle Lena couldn't solve. She wondered if they'd return, watching from some unseen plane, or if they'd chosen her for a purpose she'd never understand. Lena's life continued, but the encounter reshaped her, a quiet reminder that reality held mysteries beyond her grasp. She lived with the question, were they visitors from another world, or shadows born of her mind's fragility? The boy who bites. The morning's quiet was shattered by my daughter's voice, her words a chill I couldn't shake. When my daughter wakes up, she tells me how Grandpa is dead right away when she opens her eyes. Each dawn, her small face turned to me, eyes wide. Why is Grandpa dead? Mommy? Why is Grandpa dead? Mommy or Mommy? Grandpa is dead. Her voice was soft, insistent, a ritual that began after my father's passing. My dad passed away. I held her close, my heart aching, whispering, "He's in heaven now, sweetie." I just calmly say, "Yes, Grandpa is in heaven now, sweetie." The house felt heavier, its shadows deeper, her words a weight beyond her years. She was only 2.5, too young for such thoughts, yet they came unbidden. I watched her play, her laughter bright, but her mornings were marked by this eerie chant. The air grew thick, each sunrise a question I couldn't answer. Was it grief, or something else whispering to her in the night? The night's stillness was a lie, my daughter's cries a crack in our home's fragile peace. Last night, though, she wakes up at 2 a.m. hysterical that something bit her. She woke screaming, her small body trembling in our shared bed. "Mama, something bit me." We sleep together, and this hasn't never happened before. I pulled her close, her sobs shaking us both, my hand searching for marks. Nothing. I just figured that she's had a bad dream or something. "Just a bad dream, sweetie," I soothed, but her fear was raw, unyielding. She was hysterical, though saying, "Mama, I don't want to stay in this room. Let's go downstairs. I'm scared. I don't want to stay here. Mama, let's go downstairs," she pleaded, eyes darting to the dark corners. I carried her down, the house's silence oppressive, its walls seeming to watch. Her fear lingered, her grip tight, as if the room held a threat I couldn't see. The night stretched. Her words bit me, echoing, a mystery I couldn't dismiss. The house's daylight was no refuge, its rooms now stages for my daughter's unseen fears. Today she was on the toilet going to the washroom, and I hear her saying, "You're bad. Stop it." I heard her voice, sharp, from the bathroom. "You're bad. Stop it." I come around the corner, and I say, "Who are you talking to?" I rounded the corner, heart racing. "Who are you talking to?" "Sweetie!" She's like, "This boy here, he's a bad boy," and just points and sort of stares. She pointed, staring at empty air. "This boy here, he's a bad boy." I'm like, "What boy?" And she looks at me and back to the same spot. "What boy?" I asked, my voice trembling, her gaze fixed on nothing, and says, "The boy here, Mama, he bit my toes." "The boy here, Mama, he bit my toes," she insisted, her face serious. The bathroom's light flickered, the air cold despite the sun. Her words a chill I couldn't warm. Her words were a shadow, the boy's presence a stain on our home, my fear a growing pulse. Now I'm just like, this is weird, but okay. I'm like, okay. Is he tickling your toes or biting them? I knelt, forcing calm. Is he tickling your toes or biting them? She replied that he's biting them, and he's so bad and naughty here. He's biting them. Mama, he's so bad and naughty. she said, pointing again. Anyway, our imaginary friends come at 2½ years old like here. Imaginary friends. I thought, normal at her age, right? I am thinking, do I need to burn some sage in my home or something? But her fear, her certainty, felt wrong. Beyond a child's play. This whole thing has me a little bit freaked out. I checked the house. Corners, closets, finding nothing but unease. The bathroom mirror reflected my worry. Her words, bad boy, biting, clinging like damp air. Was it her grief? Or something darker? Watching us, the house was no longer ours. Its quiet a mask for something unseen. My daughter's eyes, its mirror. She was hysterical, though saying, "Mama, I don't want to stay in this room." Her fear followed us, her sleep broken, her mornings still marked by Grandpa's death. When my daughter wakes up, she tells me how Grandpa is dead right away. I watched her, her play shadowed, her gaze drifting to empty spaces. And says the boy here, "Mama, he bit my toes. The boy bit me," she'd whisper, pointing, her voice too old for her years. I lit candles, their flames weak against the house's chill. I researched. Grief in children, imaginary friends, finding nothing to explain her terror. The boy's presence grew, a weight in every room. His bite's a mark I couldn't see. I held her close, her small hand in mine, wondering if sage could cleanse what I couldn't name. Her fear now mine. The house's shadows whispered. The boy's bite a mark on our lives. My daughter's fear a mirror to my own. This whole thing has me a little bit freaked out. I burned sage, its smoke curling, but her eyes still sought the boy. I'm thinking, do I need to burn some sage in my home or something? She pointed. "He's there! Mama! Bad boy!" Her voice a knife. She's like this boy. Here, he's a bad boy, and just points and sort of stares. I saw nothing, but the air was wrong, heavy with unseen eyes. And says the boy here, "Mama, he bit my toes." I held her, vowing to protect her. Her words, "Grandpa," bites, echoing. When my daughter wakes up, she tells me how Grandpa is dead right away. The boy was no friend, but a guest we couldn't banish. Our home, his domain. The black-eyed strangers. The student union was a hive of noise, but a chill cut through the chatter, as if the air itself had eyes that watched me. My university's cafeteria was a daily ritual, a place of familiar faces and hurried meals. I went to the student union at my university for lunch. That day. Though a couple I didn't recognize stood out, their presence jarring amid the crowd. I spotted this couple around my age I haven't seen before, in front of me in line. Something about them felt wrong, a subtle discord that prickled my skin. I felt something was off about them immediately, too. As I ordered, I caught the girl's gaze, her eyes locking onto mine. But they weren't human, solid black, like void swallowing light. I made brief eye contact with the girl while I was ordering, and she seemed to be waiting for her drink. The weird thing, though, is that I saw straight black from her eyes. The world tilted, a fleeting vertigo, and I stumbled back to my apartment, shaken. I went back to my apartment a bit shaken up by this. I tried to forget, but her eyes lingered, a stain on my thoughts, as if they'd marked me for something I couldn't name. The bar that night wasn't just a refuge. It was a trap, its lights flickering with a purpose I couldn't see. My roommate, Prop, dragged me out to our usual haunt, a club with 2 rooms, pulsing with music and sweat. I decided to go to a bar with my roommate. His nickname is Prop, and there are 2 rooms in the club that I frequent. I needed the distraction, the black eyes fading under the promise of a good night. Forgot about the experience later on in the day. I pushed through to the second room for a drink, the crowd parting like a tide. I walked into the second room to grab a drink. As I grabbed my beer, the room shifted, and there they were, the couple from the Union, dancing with an eerie grace. Their movements too fluid, too perfect. I saw the exact same couple that I saw at the student union earlier that day, just seemingly dancing the night away. My memory fractured, time slipping away in a haze of blurred seconds. This was my last full memory for the next 4 hours. I had bits and pieces of consciousness, but they were blurry and lasted only like 10 seconds each time. The world dissolved, leaving only flashes, dark eyes, a hum, a cold touch, before darkness claimed me. The park bench was a cold anchor, the night air sharp, but my body wasn't mine, racked by a sickness that wasn't natural. I came to, slumped on a bench. Prop and his girlfriend arguing nearby, their voices distant as they ordered an Uber. My next full memory was me slumped on a park bench while Prop and his girlfriend ordered us in Uber back to our apartment. I'd only had a few drinks, nowhere near enough to lose myself. Keep in mind, I only had a few drinks throughout the night, nowhere near enough to black out. Back at the apartment, a vomiting spell hit, worse than anything I'd known, lasting into the next evening. A torment that dwarfed childhood food poisoning. What followed was the worst vomiting spell of my life that lasted into the following evening. Even worse than the near-death food poisoning as a toddler. My body rebelled, as if purging something alien, something planted by those eyes. Prop filled in the gaps, his voice uneasy, saying he and his frat brothers searched the bar for over an hour, finding no trace of me. Prop told me him and his frat brothers were looking for me at the Barath for over an hour, and I was nowhere to be found. They assumed I'd left, but my phone went unanswered. I wasn't answering my calls, obviously. The bar hadn't just lost me, it had changed me, leaving a mark I couldn't wash away, a thread of darkness in my hands. Prop's story grew stranger. He found me standing in the bar's center, eyes rolled back, muttering nonsense like a man possessed. He stated that he ordered an Uber as soon as he eventually found me, after over an hour of waiting. And apparently here I was standing and rambling with my eyes rolled in the middle of the bar as if I was possessed or something. Even Prop, a skeptic built like a linebacker, was shaken, his voice cracking as he admitted fear. Prop said that he had never been so confused or frightened in his life, even though he is one of the largest skeptics and tough guys out there. I found a single black hair in my pocket the next day, long and coarse, not mine or anyone's I knew. It felt wrong, heavier than it should, and I burned it. The smoke acrid, curling like a warning. The couple never reappeared, but they haunted my dreams, their black eyes staring from shifting faces. I haven't seen this couple since then. However, I have a few distinct eerie memories or dreams that they've appeared in. I began to wonder, were they black-eyed entities, aliens in disguise, or something else? I believe that this may have been a black-eyed human encounter, an entity who followed me, or an alien abduction in human form, something like that. The experience wasn't isolated. A friend at another university shared a similar tale. Black eyes and lost time. Though I couldn't connect the dots. I also have a friend who had a similar experience at his university, but I'm unsure if they're actually related or not. The bar felt different after that, its lights dimmer, its corners hiding shadows that seemed to watch. I stopped going, sticking to campus haunts, but the hair's memory lingered, a tangible link to that night. I checked my photos, hoping for proof, but found only a blurry shot from the bar, a streak of black where the couple should have been. Prop avoided the topic, his skepticism shaken, and I didn't push. I began noticing small things, a hum in quiet moments, like the one from my lost hours, or a flicker in mirrors, too brief to be sure. I wondered if I'd been marked, chosen for something I couldn't fathom. The university moved on, its rhythm unchanged, but I carried that night, a weight of questions with no answers, a fear that those black eyes were still out there, waiting to find me again. The shadow in the standby glow. Our master bedroom has the bedroom itself, the bathroom, and a reading room that we have a treadmill in off of the bathroom. The house was a modern sprawl, all clean lines and open spaces, but it had a weight to it, a heaviness that settled in the quiet moments. The first night we returned from a trip, I felt it, a hum in the air, like the house was breathing. The bedroom suite was our sanctuary, but the reading room, with its treadmill facing a wide window, always felt exposed. At night, the room seemed to shift, the shadows stretching longer than they should. I chalked it up to exhaustion, but deep down, I knew something was off. The house wasn't empty, even when we were alone. The treadmill itself faces away from the bathroom and towards the window, so the screen on the treadmill is visible from the bathroom. Its large screen, like a small TV, glowed faintly in standby mode, a soft rectangle of light in the dark. The screen is pretty large, and it's basically a small TV. When not in use, the screen dims to a standby mode, and it's still lit, but very dim. I'd been up late, my wife already asleep, her breathing steady in the bedroom. I stepped into the bathroom, flipping on the light, and froze. The treadmill screen, 25 feet away, was wrong. In the darkness of the treadmill room, the perfectly rectangular screen is partially eclipsed in the bottom left corner by a round object. It looked like a balloon, featureless, floating in my line of sight. My pulse quickened, the air suddenly thick, as if the room itself was watching me. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. It looked as if someone was holding a balloon in my field of vision directly between my eyes and the treadmill. I reached for the second light switch. I flipped the second bathroom light on, and when I look back into the treadmill room, nothing is there, and I can see the full rectangular screen of Vekil. The screen glowed evenly now, no obstruction, but the hairs on my neck stood up, a primal warning I couldn't shake. I investigate the room, and I find nothing. The treadmill room was empty, just the machine, a stack of books, and the window reflecting the bathroom's light. Putting this out of my mind, and assuming that I was just seeing things, I brushed my teeth and eventually get into bed. I slid under the covers, my wife's warmth a comfort. I never felt any sense of fear or dread. But as I set my phone on the nightstand, my wife immediately shoots up and cries out in the dark and frantically crawls into my arms, stuttering that there's a bear in the room. Her voice was raw, panicked, her nails digging into my arm. I grabbed my phone's flashlight, heart pounding, expecting an intruder. Flashlight lights up in the room, and nothing. Of course, the bedroom was empty, the shadows still. My wife even got up to look around and under the bed. She was trembling, her face pale. She said that she saw a black bear walking towards her side of the bed. It had crouched beside her, its bulk impossibly silent, before vanishing. The image burned into my mind. A bear. Here, in our bedroom, where nothing should be. We sat up, checking every corner, but the house was quiet. Too quiet. Something had slipped into our space, and it wasn't gone. We calmed down eventually, and we go to sleep. But the next morning, we couldn't shake it. We discussed it, and she said that she saw a black bear walking towards her side of the bed, although couldn't say if it was from the bathroom or the hallway. The bear wasn't threatening, she said, but its presence was wrong, like it didn't belong. I told her about the round shadow on the treadmill screen, and her eyes widened. She'd felt something watching her too. We'd lived in this house for years, never experiencing anything like this. But now, the house felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for us to notice it. I started asking questions. A neighbor, an older man who'd lived in the area forever, mentioned the land's history. Before the subdivision, it had been a stretch of wilderness, home to bears and other wildlife, until developers cleared it. He said there were stories, hunters who'd seen things in the woods, shapes that weren't animals, that didn't move right. The house was built on old ground, he said, and sometimes old things don't leave. I couldn't stop thinking about that round shadow, how it floated, featureless, like it was testing me. My wife started noticing small things. Her keys moved from the counter to the reading room, a faint scratching in the walls at night. The treadmill screen flickered sometimes, even when powered off, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. We called a local historian, someone who knew the area's past. She came over, her face tightening as she walked through the house. She said the land held echoes, not ghosts, but impressions of what used to be. Animals, people, moments trapped in time. The bear, she thought, wasn't a bear at all, but something older, tied to the land's memory. She warned us not to engage with it, not to give it a name, or it might stay. We tried to laugh it off, but the house felt heavier after that, the air thick with something unspoken. We stayed cautious, avoiding the reading room at night. But the hum was always there, low and steady, like the house was alive. One night, I woke to the treadmill screen glowing brighter than it should, its light spilling into the bathroom. I swore I saw that round shape again, hovering, not a balloon, but something denser, watching. My wife stopped sleeping well, saying she felt eyes on her, even in the dark. We found scratches on the bedroom floor, faint but deep, like claws had dragged across it. We didn't talk about moving, not yet, but the thought was there. The house wasn't ours anymore. It belonged to something else. Eventually, we packed up and left, the weight of the house lifting as we drove away. But I still see that shadow sometimes, in new places, a round blur in the corner of my eye. The historian's words stuck with me. Echoes don't die. They just wait. Our new home is quiet, but some nights, I hear that hum, faint and distant, like it's calling us back. The old house stands empty now, its windows dark, its treadmill screen dim. I wonder if the next owners see it too. That shape in the standby glow, waiting for someone to notice. The woman on Highway 60. The night stretched over Mulberry like a heavy shroud, its silence broken only by the hum of our car's engine on Highway 60. I was just a kid, wedged in the back seat, my brother's chatter fading as the dark pressed against the windows. The road was empty, its curves notorious for swallowing careless drivers. But we were headed to McDonald's, a rare late-night treat. Then I saw her, a figure on the roadside, her white dress glowing faintly, her walk so wrong it stole my breath. She wasn't just walking, she was drifting. And she knew we were watching. Mulberry was a speck of a town, its McDonald's and corner store the only signs of life, each miles apart on roads that felt forgotten. Highway 60 cut through it, a ribbon of asphalt with a reputation for tragedy. Its accidents whispered about in hushed tones. We'd driven this road countless times, but tonight it felt different. The air thick with something unspoken, the darkness alive with secrets. My dad, a truck driver, was used to late nights, but even he seemed uneasy, his grip tight on the wheel. The drive-thru was empty, the streets deserted, our laughter a fragile shield against the quiet. We were halfway home, the bag of fries warm in my lap, when the conversation died. A sudden hush that felt like a warning. On the right, she appeared, a woman walking along the shoulder, her long white dress trailing like mist. Her arms hung limp, her steps slow, unnatural, as if the ground didn't touch her. My heart stuttered, a child's fear blooming in the dark. Dad let out a nervous laugh, his voice breaking the spell, but it didn't ease the chill. Why was she here, dressed like that, walking a road where no one walked? The highway stretched empty behind her. No houses, no lights, just miles of nothing. She was alone, yet not alone. Her presence a weight that pressed against us, a puzzle we couldn't solve. I stared, my eyes locked on her, but her face was a blur, a void where features should be. We passed her, the car's headlights sweeping over her dress, pristine despite the dust and grime of the road. I turned, desperate to see, but she was fading, her form swallowed by the dark, as if she'd never been there. My brother was quiet, Dad's laughter gone, the car a bubble of unease. We tried to speak, to describe her, but her face was gone, a blank we couldn't fill, a memory that slipped through our fingers like sand. I lived in a tiny town in Florida called Malberry. We basically had a McDonald's, a local corner store, and then a couple of M&Pop shops. They were all about 10 to 20 minutes apart by car. My neighborhood connected to Highway 60, which is a pretty infamous spot for bad accidents. Me and my brother, he would have been around maybe teen to 20, tagged along, and we drove over to the restaurant. The streets were pretty dead, and the drive-thru was thankfully empty. On the right side of the road was a woman. Walking, something about the way that she walked was just odd, too. Her arms didn't raise or move with her steps. They just sort of hung there. The car's silence was deafening, the highway stretching before us, its darkness a mirror to the unease that gripped us. Her pace was slower than a normal walking pace, and she wore a super long white dress that was practically untouched. The dress was wrong, too clean for the dusty shoulder, too long for a midnight stroll, its hem trailing like a ghost's veil. I remember my dad kind of had a weirded out laugh, like, why was she wearing that? His voice was strained, a father's attempt to shield us, but the fear was there, a crack in his calm that I felt in my bones. The weirdest part was the moments after we drove past. We couldn't recall what she looked like at all. We tried, my brother stammering, Dad frowning, but her face was gone, a blank where eyes and mouth should be. We all could recall long hair and the long dress, obviously, but we all collectively sort of blanked out on facial features. It was as if she'd erased herself, leaving only her dress, her walk, a memory that didn't fit. When I turned, she was still walking in the same direction at the same pace, and she quickly faded out of view into the dark. But it was almost like she just sort of disappeared. I pressed my face to the window, searching the darkness, but she was gone, swallowed by the night. Her presence, a riddle we couldn't solve. The highway was empty, its curves a silent witness to our fear, its reputation for accidents a shadow that loomed larger now. Mulberry was asleep, its few lights distant, the McDonald's drive-thru the only place open. But she wasn't headed there. Her path leading nowhere. A journey that didn't make sense. We spoke in hushed tones, piecing together what we'd seen. But the details slipped away. Her face a void we couldn't fill. My brother wondered if we'd imagined it, a trick of the night. But I knew better. My child's heart certain of her reality. Dad drove faster, the car a refuge. But the highway felt alive. Its darkness a stage for her walk. Her presence a truth we couldn't deny. The road stretched empty behind us. No houses, no lights, just miles of nothing. A path she shouldn't have walked. The stories came back to me. Whispers of Highway 60's ghosts, of drivers lost to its curves, their spirits lingering in the dark. Was she one of them? A soul bound to the road, her dress a memory of a life cut short? The thought chilled me, a child's fear laced with wonder, a puzzle I couldn't solve. We didn't stop, didn't look back, the car carrying us home, but her walk was burned into me, a memory that wouldn't fade, a truth that haunted me still. I lay awake that night, the house quiet, the highway's shadow looming in my mind. She was out there, walking, her dress untouched, her face a blank, a mystery I couldn't name. Mulberry was small, its secrets few, but Highway 60 was different. A road that held more than asphalt, a path where the dead walked, a truth I'd glimpsed, a child caught in the dark, a witness to the unknown. The memory of her walk clung to me, a shadow that didn't fade, a truth that shaped my nights for years. It's something that's always stuck out in my memory. To this day, it was rare to see anyone walking on the side of the road there, and especially so at night. Mulberry was a ghost town after dark, its streets empty, its few shops closed, the highway a ribbon of danger no one dared to walk. There was really nowhere for her to be going at that hour, besides the McDonald's, I suppose, which was a drive-thru only at that hour. Her path made no sense, leading nowhere. A journey that defied reason. The direction that she was walking from it had no houses or structures for like several miles, meaning that she would have been walking for at least an hour to be where she was when we saw her. The highway stretched empty, its shoulder a no man's land, its accidents a warning to all. Not many people even walked near the highway like that, due to the rate of accidents that I mentioned earlier. She shouldn't have been there, her dress too clean, her walk too slow, her presence a violation of the night's rules. I don't know. Something about this event always stuck out to me, the way that she was walking. The fact that we couldn't remember her face, the way she sort of just disappeared in the darkness. Like that it just feels off to me, even all these years later. The memory was a wound, a puzzle I couldn't solve, a truth that lingered in the quiet of my dreams. I'd lie awake, replaying her walk, her dress, the blank of her face, searching for answers that didn't come. Was she a ghost, a memory, or something else? A spirit bound to Highway 60, a soul that walked where we drove? I asked around, cautious, sharing the story with friends, with neighbors, their eyes wide, their whispers of the highway's ghosts a confirmation. Mulberry had its tales, of drivers lost, of figures seen in the dark, their dresses white, their faces gone. She fit the mold, a spirit bound to the road, her walk a call to notice, a truth I'd glimpsed as a child. The highway was hers, its curves a stage for her dance, its darkness a cloak for her mystery. I didn't drive that road again, not at night. its shadows too deep, its memories too vivid. The McDonald's was a memory, the highway a wound, her walk a truth I couldn't deny. I'd see her in my dreams, her dress glowing, her arms limp, her face a blank, a puzzle I couldn't solve. Mulberry was small, its secrets few, but Highway 60 was different. A road that held more than asphalt, a path where the dead walked, a truth I'd carry forever. The years passed, but her walk stayed with me, a memory of a night, a road, a woman who wasn't there. I'd tell the story, cautious, my voice low, the highway's shadow looming in my mind. She was out there, walking, her dress untouched, her face a void, a mystery I couldn't name. The world was bigger now, its mysteries vast, but she was mine, a woman on Highway 60, a truth that haunted me still, a child's glimpse into the dark, a dance I'd never forget. The marked shadow. The trailer creaked under an unseen weight, its walls trembling as if alive with a presence I couldn't name. I lay in my narrow bed, the air thick with the sour scent of mildew and despair, when a chill gripped me, not from the drafty windows, but from something brushing against my mind. The park outside was a maze of rusted metal and broken dreams, its silence a mask for something waiting. A shadow moved, not cast by light, but born of it, its intent seeping into the room, marking me as its target. The darkness pressed closer, the trailer's groans a heartbeat that synced with my own. My parents' drunken laughter echoed from the living room, a fragile barrier against the unknown. But it did nothing to ease the pressure building in my chest. The air grew heavy, a presence lingering just beyond sight, its gaze a physical touch that made my skin crawl. The park's isolation, surrounded by empty lots and forgotten lives, amplified my fear. No help, no escape, just me and the entity that haunted this place. It was awake, and it knew I was too. I turned my face to the wall, seeking comfort in its cold surface, when a sensation hit, sharp, invasive, like a hand striking my soul. The bed shook, and a force slammed into my back, a pain that burned through my shirt, leaving me gasping. I spun around, heart pounding, expecting my parents, but the room was empty, the darkness thicker where they should have been. Something had marked me, a violation that lingered, a presence that wasn't human. Watching from the shadows, the pain subsided into a dull ache. But the fear didn't. I scrambled under the bed, my breath ragged, searching for an explanation, but found only dust and the echo of that strike. The trailer felt smaller, its walls closing in, as if the entity was drawing me deeper into its domain. My room, once a refuge, had become a trap, and the air carried a whisper, a promise of return, a threat I couldn't escape. I ran to my parents, my scream a plea for salvation, but the night held its breath, waiting for my next move. The aftermath left a scar, a memory etched into my skin and mind. The red handprint on my back was a brand, a mark of something that had crossed into our world. My parents' shock, my mother's tears, couldn't erase the terror of that night, nor the sense that the trailer was alive with a history I didn't understand. The park, with its rusted trailers and broken souls, was a graveyard for whatever had touched me, and I felt its eyes even as I fled to their room, seeking safety in their flawed embrace. So this is back when I was in grade 1. I was probably around maybe 6. I'm 19 now, and I lived in a really ratty old trailer park in a small town. And this one Trey had a lot of bad stuff happen while I was in there, which I blame on whatever the heck was in there before us. To be honest, too, I really don't know where to start. I'm no writer, but I just want to get this out. So I don't have many memories from this place, mostly just pictures, but they're all bad. Very, very bad. In fact, my parents were both heavy alcoholics. They kept each other going pretty much. My mother was working at some place where they sell or rent RVs, and my dad was one of those mechanics who would work for whoever paid him. So they had money to drink pretty much every day. I knew that once one of them walked in with a few cases of beer, that it was pretty much time to disappear. Anyway, the point is that once people drank in that trailer, they'd transform anger. Screaming every form of abuse, the strike was only the beginning. A sign of the trailer's dark legacy. One night I was laying in bed asleep facing the wall, and I feel a hard slap right on my back. From what I remember, I turned around, terrified, thinking at first that it was one of them, and then looked under the bed, then ran to my parents' room and told them what happened. And my mom says that she's never ever heard a child scream like I did. They ran into my room and turned on the light, and I was freaking out from what she made out from my blubbering was that something hit me. They lifted up my shirt, and what else do they see but a huge red handprint right on my back. My mother's voice trembled as she traced the mark, her disbelief mirroring my own. They moved me to their room and I slept with them until I was about 10. After that, I never ever slept facing the wall until I was about 17. The entity's presence lingered, revealing itself to others. And it's funny too because my mom says that she was talking to my auntie on the couch there before or after this event. And my auntie was facing the hallway. Mom's back to the hall. She says that my auntie looked toward the hall while they were talking, and her face just went completely white. My mom turned around, didn't see anything, and asked auntie what she had seen. My auntie had to calm down a bit before she told my mom, but apparently she had seen what looked like a little old lady around 40, and some kind of sheet or cloak over it, walk from my parents' room towards my room. But there was a huge tail dragging out from behind it now. They were dead sober this day, and they still swear by it. The trailer's curse extended beyond that night, a weight on my health and spirit. In this house too, I've gotten asthma and sent to the hospital with a combo of chickenpox and pneumonia. I even went deaf at that point. But this house was just awful. I moved out with my mom when I was maybe 10 and happened to drive past there one day to see it getting demolished. The demolition was a relief, a severing of ties with that malevolent force. And I guess I'm just wondering what happened there before we moved in. Or why or how that thing ended up in there. That place was old. That much was clear. I'm just happy that that thing, whatever it was, didn't follow us. The red handprint faded, but its memory didn't. The trailer park, a relic of decay, seemed to harbor a history of violence and sorrow, its walls soaked with the echoes of those who came before. My parents' alcoholism blurred their awareness, but the entity thrived in their neglect, feeding on the chaos they unleashed. I often wondered if the old lady with the tail was a guardian of that past, a spirit bound to the trailer, punishing or protecting in its twisted way. The mark on my back was a reminder, a scar that tied me to a mystery I couldn't solve, a presence that had chosen me. My auntie's sighting added layers to the enigma. She described the figure with a shudder, its cloak dragging like a shroud, its tail a grotesque appendage that defied logic. My mother, sober that night, swore it was real, her faith in my story unwavering despite her usual skepticism. The trailer's age, its rusted frame and sagging roof, hinted at a history of occupants who might have angered or summoned such a being. I imagined voices from the past, cries trapped in the wood, calling out through that old lady's form. Seeking release or revenge, moving out was a liberation. But the past clung to me. The demolition of the trailer was a spectacle I couldn't avoid. Its collapse a symbolic end to the entity's reign. I drove by, my heart pounding, watching the bulldozers tear into the metal, hoping to bury the memory with it. Yet, the question lingered. What had lived there before us? A curse, a spirit, a remnant of some forgotten tragedy? I was glad it didn't follow, but the relief was tinged with a lingering unease, a sense that its mark might resurface in my dreams. The handprint, the old lady, the illnesses, they wove a tapestry of dread that shaped my childhood. My parents' drinking masked their awareness, but I felt the trailer's weight. Its history, a burden I carried out into the world. The demolition didn't erase the mystery, only paused it, leaving me to wonder if the entity had moved on to another unwitting soul. The trailer park was gone, but its shadow remained. A question mark in my mind, a story I'd never fully escape. The scream across the street. The night was alive with the hum of my headset. Gunfire from Call of Duty drowning out the world beyond my duplex. Living in Barrio Logan, San Diego. My small place sat next to a park, its side entrance open to let in the cool night air. The screen door was locked, a flimsy barrier between me and the street, but something broke through the game's chaos, a sound that didn't belong, sharp and human. I paused, heart quickening, as a scream sliced through the darkness, raw and desperate. Was it the game or something real, calling from just outside my door? My friends' voices crackled over the headset, pulling me back, but the scream came again, unmistakable. A woman's cry that chilled my blood. What was happening out there? And why did it feel like I was already too late? I was playing Call of Duty when the first scream hit. I heard screaming outside, but thought that it was just my game. I brushed it off, focused on the screen, but I then heard it again, followed by a female scream. My friends, mid-game, noticed too. My friends, over my headset, pointed it out and asked me what was going on in my house. I laughed, saying, I thought that was my game and nothing is happening in my home. But doubt crept in, and I stood, headset still on, peering through the screen door. I got up though and checked outside, across the street, under the park's dim streetlights. A nightmare unfolded. Right across the street, there was a man shoving a woman around the street and hit her while she was screaming. She fumbled for her phone, but he grabbed it and threw it across the road at my fence. The device skidded against my property, unnoticed by him as he fled around the corner. He never saw me, though. He then runs around the corner and she goes the opposite way. Instinct took over. I bolted outside, my bare feet hitting the pavement, chasing after the woman. I run out and catch her around the corner, and I'm trying to help her out. She kept walking, her face pale, eyes hollow as she glanced back. She kept walking and blankly stared at me over her shoulder. I called out. I asked her if she had somewhere to go, but she didn't answer, her steps unsteady. I asked if she needed help, and with that, she replied with "go away" in a shaky voice. Her words, fragile but firm, stopped me cold. I hesitated, ready to turn back, when a shadow loomed. The man whips around the corner and starts screaming at me. His voice was venomous, his eyes wild. He starts telling me that I'm getting into something that I don't need to be in. A chill ran through me. his presence radiating threat. I got a really weird feeling from that guy. He stepped closer, his hand sliding under his shirt, a gesture too deliberate to ignore. He then puts his hand under his shirt and asks if I'm trying to get shot. My heart pounded, fear locking my joints. I raised my hands, voice shaking. I back off and said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry." I wasn't trying to get into someone's business. I just saw her crying and asked if she was okay. But I'll let you handle it. I edged past him, every step deliberate, praying he'd let me go. I walk past him to go back home, and he starts walking behind me. His footsteps echoed mine. Too close, too heavy. Panic surged, and I started sprinting and sprinted all the way around the block, took the back entrance to the alley and went inside. I slammed the door, locking it, my breath ragged as I dialed 911. I called the police. Minutes later, 5 squad cars zoomed by my home. Their sirens faded into the night, leaving me with no answers. I'm still not sure if they actually caught the guy or not. The aftermath was a blur. I stayed inside, headset forgotten, the game's violence now trivial. I replayed the scene, the woman's blank stare, her shaky refusal, the man's veiled threat. Had I done enough? Should I have pushed harder to help her, or was backing off the only way to survive? I checked the news for days, searching for reports of an arrest, but found nothing. The park across the street, once a place of laughter, felt tainted, its shadows hiding threats I couldn't see. I asked neighbors if they'd heard the screams, but most had been asleep, the night's chaos mine alone to carry. The woman's phone, I later found, was gone from my fence, retrieved by her, him, or someone else. I'll never know. I moved out months later, the duplex's open door a reminder of that night's vulnerability. My new place has bars on the windows, a habit born of fear. I don't game with the door open anymore, and the park's lights trigger a flinch every time I pass. I wonder about her. Did she find safety? Or was she still running? And him, did he slip away, waiting for another chance? The police never followed up, their silence as unsettling as his threat. I keep a bat by the door now, check the locks twice, and avoid dark streets. That night taught me how close danger can lurk, how a scream can change everything, and how some questions never find answers. The angry spirit. The liquor store's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Jamie restocked shelves in the back, the late-night quiet wrapping around him like a shroud. The small town was asleep, but the store felt alive, its shadows shifting just beyond his sight. He paused, a familiar chill creeping up his spine, as if someone stood behind him. The air grew heavy, carrying a presence he couldn't shake. A friend, perhaps, but not one he could see. Jamie's hand hovered over a can, the same kind his old high school buddy Steve had bought just days before. Then, with a sharp crack, the can flew off the shelf, slamming to the floor as if struck by an unseen fist. Jamie froze, his breath catching, the echo of the impact ringing in his ears. The store was empty, yet he wasn't alone. He stumbled back, heart racing, the memory of Steve's recent death flooding his mind. Was this his friend's spirit, lashing out in anger, or something darker, drawn to the grief that clung to Jamie like a second skin? The can rolled to a stop, the silence returning. But Jamie's unease lingered. He sensed a message in the act, a cry from beyond that he wasn't sure he wanted to hear, yet couldn't ignore. So I recently got a job at my local liquor store. Jamie, 28, loved the laid-back vibe of his new job. a 5-minute walk from his apartment in a tight-knit town. My job is 5 minutes away from my place, and I honestly love this job because it's really chill. And since I'm a local, I already know many of the customers that come in on a regular basis. The role reconnected him with old faces. This job helped me get back into contact with a lot of people that I haven't seen for a few years as well. One day, Steve, a high school friend, walked in. One day, an old friend. His name is Steve, from high school, walks in, and he remembers me, but we hadn't seen each other for a few years. They reminisced, laughing about a mutual friend's exaggerated tales, like being shot in the leg with consistent details. So we had a nice talk and made plans to hang out with a mutual friend. Sometime in the near future, I remember that we talked about how our mutual friend would do this thing where he would tell these stories that sounded super fake and made up. For example, he told both of us a story about how he supposedly got shot in the leg, but the story was different every time. Jamie likened their friend to Paul Bunyan, and Steve agreed, chuckling. Anyway, I tell Steve that our mutual friend is like Paul Bunyan, with all his tall tales. Steve laughs and says, "Yeah, totally, bro. He is Paul Bunyan." Steve bought beatbox drinks, a popular choice, and Jamie asked about their taste. I remember that he had bought some beatboxes, which are this alcoholic beverage that's pretty popular in my store. I remember the exact flavor that he had and everything. And I remember clearly asking him if those things were any good. And Steve tells me, "Yeah, they mess you up." Days later, Jamie's co-worker Diane seemed troubled. About a week later, I come into work, and I see my co-worker Diane. She is acting strange in a way where I suspect that she's going through something tough in her life. She asked if he remembered Steve, then revealed his death. She asks me if I remember Steve, and I say yes. Of course, she informs me that apparently he had passed away. Jamie wondered if it was an overdose, but Diane withheld details, saying it wasn't her place. I asked if it was an overdose, and she told me that it wasn't, but also said that she felt like it was not her place to tell me the real cause of the death. Jamie planned to clarify his connection to Steve. Well, I think it over, and I decide the next time that I see Diane, I would explain to her that I have known Steve since like high school, and he's not just some local customer that I met at work. During a late shift, Jamie overheard Diane and the manager discussing Steve's death, mentioning a cleanup bill for his wife due to the gruesome scene. A few days pass, and I see Diane at shift again, mind you. I work very late, from like 9 o'clock p.m. to 2 o'clock a.m., usually. And before I get a chance to talk to her, the manager comes in, and Diane goes out to the front to talk to her. I let them have their girl talk for a few minutes. Then I go outside to let the manager know that I need to quickly use the restroom. Well, when I go outside, I overhear Diane say something along the lines of, "Yeah, it's messed up that they would make the wife pay money to have the brains all over the place cleaned up," the manager replied. "Oh yeah, she's going to most likely be getting a bill for that cleanup." Shocked, Jamie retreated, grieving silently. When I heard this, I knew I went back inside the store and just felt so sad for my friends as Steve. I just stared into space for a few minutes. Diane and the manager noticed his reaction but said nothing, and went back outside to find Diane and the manager kind of staring at me as if they knew that I'd heard what she had said and were waiting for me to mention it. Later, alone with Diane, Jamie shared his history with Steve, prompting her to open up. I chose not to, and I waited until I was alone with Diane to discuss the issue. I explained to her that me and Steve, we were high school friends, and she opened up to me after that. Diane revealed her own loss to suicide, and Steve's family details: a newborn, a 4-year-old son, and an 8-year partner. Turns out that Diane had an ex who did the same thing. A few years back, she really opened up to me about what was going on after this. She told me that Steve had just had a newborn 2 days before the incident, and another boy who was about 4. Steve's longtime partner had been with him for like 8 years straight, without any major hitches. She described driving Steve's widow and son, the child confused about his father's absence, believing God had taken him. Diane tells me that she has known both Steve and his girlfriend since the 1st grade. They all grew up together, apparently. She tells me that she was driving the car with Steve's girlfriend in the back seat, and the widow was finally able to get some sleep in the back seat as Diane was driving. And well, then the 4-year-old decides to ask where Dad is and why he can't see him anymore. He told the kid that he was with God now. It's all just so horribly sad, because the poor child thinks that God kidnapped his dad, and now he's mad at God. Apparently, that night, restocking drinks, Jamie felt a presence, but this is where things get a bit strange. You see, that night I went to restock beverages in the back. It was around 1 o'clock a.m., and I suddenly had the sensation that I wasn't alone, and it actually felt as if I was with someone that I knew, but I couldn't see them. Suspecting Steve, he resolved to stay calm. I had a feeling that my buddy might try to send me a message. I know that's weird, but I thought to myself that if I see anything, I would try my best not to be scared and pass on whatever message that I receive if possible. Handling a beatbox can, it was struck to the floor with force. Well, I grabbed the exact same beverage that I sold him last time, that I saw him, and put it onto a shelf. I bent over to pick up something else, and the drink that I had just put on the shelf got smacked really loudly to the ground, as if someone was frustrated or angry, and hit it. Unnerved. Jamie called friends and drank whiskey to cope. This made me very uncomfortable, obviously, and I ended up calling some friends to come and chill with me for the rest of my shift. I even took a few shots of whiskey to calm myself down. He told his Buddhist mother, who suggested a prayer for positive energy. Later that night after work, I tell my mom what happened. She explains to me that he might be frustrated and angry at his own sad decisions, and the fact that it was too late to change it. My mother is a Buddhist, so she gives me a Buddhist prayer to play at work to bring positive energy here. The next shift, with his mother present. A foam cup was gently tossed during the prayer, feeling peaceful. I play the prayer at work the next day, and she also comes to accompany me for part of my shift, but during the prayer, a foam cup also got thrown by nothing, and my mom and I both saw it. This time, however, it felt like a much more, I don't know, like peaceful action. Without anger. Behind it again. I know that's weird to say, but that's just how I interpreted it. Almost as if he was saying that he heard the prayer. His mother believed it was Steve communicating, and Jamie felt he had left peacefully. My mom told me that she felt that this was him trying to communicate. In my opinion, the prayer did what it was supposed to do, and I feel as if he left peacefully. And the foam cup being lightly tossed was his way of saying, "Hey man, I'm sorry I scared you the other day. It's time for me to go." Jamie mourned Steve, hoping others avoid such paths. I miss my buddy, and I hope anyone who hears this that is going through tough times in life gets through it and chooses to live on things like this are never the right path, and it will only lead to more pain for everyone involved. The events remained a mystery, but he believed something paranormal had occurred. I still think about all of this a lot, and to be honest, I can't really make any sense of it, other than that something paranormal happened. The store returned to its quiet routine, but Jamie couldn't shake the memory of Steve's presence. He kept the prayer on his phone, playing it during late shifts, hoping to maintain the peace he felt that night. Customers came and went, their laughter filling the air. But Jamie's thoughts often drifted to Steve's family, especially the 4-year-old grappling with his father's absence. The weight of that loss lingered, a reminder of life's fragility. Diane became a closer friend, their shared grief forging a bond. She spoke of Steve's humor, his love for his kids, and Jamie vowed to honor his memory by checking on his family when he could. The beatbox cans on the shelf now held a different meaning, a silent tribute to a lost friend. Jamie avoided touching them unless necessary, half expecting another message from beyond. Life moved forward, but the store's back room felt different, as if Steve's spirit had left a mark. Jamie carried the lesson forward: to live, to heal, and to hold those he loved a little closer, knowing how quickly they could be gone. The white sphere, the darkness was absolute, a void where I first knew I existed, my mind waking like a machine sparking to life. The earliest memory that I have is from when I was possibly maybe 3 or 4 years old. I was conscious, aware, but blind, trapped in a black silence for what felt like an eternity. The best way to describe what I was seeing from my point of view was almost like I was a robot being turned on for the first time. 5. 10 seconds passed, my heart a faint pulse. Then light flickered, faint and gray. Everything was dark. I remember knowing that I was conscious, but for a good 5 to 10 seconds I couldn't see anything. My vision cleared, but the world was monochrome, shades of black and white, stark and cold. That's when I finally could see something. But for some reason, everything was in shades of black and white. I sat, immobile, in what I later knew was my parents' kitchen, my eyes locked on a white tumble dryer, its clothes spinning endlessly. My eyes adjusted to the light, and I found myself seated in what I believe was my parents' kitchen, fixated on a white tumble dryer. The silence was total, my body frozen, a helpless passenger in my own mind. I couldn't move, and it was total silence. I remember feeling helpless. The dryer's hum was absent, the world mute, my fear a quiet scream I couldn't voice. The kitchen's edges blurred, the light dimming, as if the scene wasn't mine to keep. The kitchen vanished, darkness swallowing me again, my consciousness a fragile spark in the void. It was such a weird feeling to describe, but suddenly there was total darkness again, but my consciousness remained intact. I knew I existed, but the black was suffocating, endless, a prison I feared I'd never escape. It was as if I had just discovered my own existence, and I was feeling helpless and kind of afraid. Panic clawed at me, the silence louder than any sound, my mind racing. I didn't want to be in total darkness forever. I really wasn't sure what was going on. Then, light returned, faint, revealing a world of black, broken by towering white pillars. I finally regained my vision. I woke up in a completely black world around me, were some sort of white, towering structures. Figures of white smoke perched atop them, their forms vague, their presence heavy. That resembled pillars with figures made of white smoke perched on top. A dozen, maybe more, stared down, featureless but watching, their gaze await. I couldn't make out any features except for their general presence. I would guess that there were a dozen of them staring at me. The landscape stretched, a labyrinth of shadow and light, alien and vast. My body felt small, exposed. The air thick with an unspoken threat. The pillars looming like silent judges. The labyrinth pulsed, its ground trembling. The smoke figure's gaze unyielding. My fear a living thing. The landscape stretched into what seemed like a labyrinth, and as I tried to make sense of it all, the ground started shaking. I turned, heart pounding, as a colossal white sphere loomed, perfectly round, rolling toward me. I turn around as fast as I can, and a colossal, perfectly round white sphere is coming my way. It moved fast, unstoppable, the ground quaking under its weight. This was all happening so fast that I wasn't really sure of what to do. I panicked, my legs moving, running through the maze. The sphere's roar deafening. I just panicked and started running around again. The feeling of helplessness and fear makes me sweat. The pillars blurred, the figures watching, their silence a contrast to my terror. I ran as fast as I could, but the ball was just too fast. The sphere caught me, crushing me. No pain, only paralyzing fear. It crashed into me, and my memory is crystal clear of me being totally crushed by this thing. I felt it press, my world collapsing. Yet the smoke figures drew near, their presence oddly safe. Thankfully, there was no pain, only a paralyzing fear. I remember feeling the presence of the white smoke figures around me. Darkness returned, my fear lingering. The sphere's weight a memory I couldn't shake. The darkness was final, my consciousness fading. The sphere's crush, a door to oblivion. Strangely, I felt safe when I sensed them arrive near me. I didn't sense malevolence or anything. The smoke figure's calm was a fleeting comfort, their forms dissolving as blackness took me. After getting crushed, darkness again this time, though it was as if my consciousness had disappeared too. I vanished, no thoughts, no fear, until light returned years later. Normalcy a stark contrast. I don't remember a single thing until my 5th birthday. That is then I have absolutely normal childhood memories. Birthdays, toys, siblings, nature, school, my life unfolded, bright and untainted. Birthdays playing with toys, my siblings exploring nature, first day of school, etc. The memory lay buried, forgotten, until I was alone. The house quiet. A video game paused. For years and years, I didn't remember any of this. It was until I was alone at home, playing some video games. It surged back. Vivid. The dryer, the pillars, the sphere, crushing me. As the memories of that happening rushed back, I literally started shaking in fear. I trembled, my breath short. The fear so real, it gripped my chest. A panic I couldn't fight. The house spun, my world tilting. The memory more than a dream, a truth I couldn't deny. The panic was a storm, my body betraying me. The memory a wound reopened. The feeling was so vivid that I had my first and, thankfully, only panic attack. I lay on my bed, tears streaming, breath ragged, the sphere's weight crushing me again. I just laid on my bed, tears started pouring down my face, and I couldn't catch my breath. I breathed deep, prayed, strange for a non-religious man, calming slowly. I eventually calmed down by doing some breathing exercises and praying, which was weird for me, because I'm not a religious person. Depression lingered, the memory a shadow I couldn't shake. Once I calmed down, I was still depressed for a few weeks after this experience. I told no one. The fear too raw, the story too strange. I've never shared it with anyone. I dismissed it as a child's fantasy, unreal, but its clarity haunted me. I eventually just decided to attribute it to kids seeing and experiencing weird stuff. But it wasn't real, right? In quiet moments, reading, The memory returned, vivid, unshakable. Once in a while, especially if I'm quiet reading or doing something with no noise around me, the memory always comes back. The dryers spin, the pillars gaze, the spheres crush. I relived it, sweating, my life's joy dimmed by this enigma. The memory was a chain, its weight a constant pull. The spheres crush a truth I couldn't bury. That's my weird first memory story. My life, happy, full with my girlfriend. Son and daughter on the way, stood in contrast. Yet the shadow lingered. I'm in my mid-20s, working in marketing and sales. Have a girlfriend. We have a son and a baby daughter on the way. I thrived. No drugs, no illness, a childhood of joy. Yet this vision haunted me. I don't smoke, don't drink, don't take any pills. I don't have any diagnosed mental illness or disorders. The kitchen's monochrome, the pillars gaze, the spheres roar. They felt real, not a child's dream. It definitely feels more like a memory and less like something that I've made up. I searched for answers, psychology, neurology, folklore, finding tales of visions, other worlds, none fitting. I'd like to get this off my chest as well and try and understand if others have also had this happen to them. Online forums held stories of childhood memories, surreal and vivid, some like mine, others darker. I shared mine, anonymous, my words trembling, seeking connection. I've never shared it with anyone. Replies came. Some called it trauma, others a glimpse beyond. None eased the fear. My son's laughter, my girlfriend's touch, grounded me. But quiet moments betrayed me. Once in a while, especially if I'm quiet reading or doing something with no noise around me, the memory always comes back. The dryer spun, the pillars watched, the sphere crushed. I sweated, suppressing it. I can relive that stuff in my head, very vividly. I wondered, was it a glitch, a vision, or something watching me still? I remember getting crushed by a giant white sphere while something watched on. I lived, loved, but the memory was a door I couldn't close. Its truth, a weight I carried alone. As I'm sharing this, I'm trying to shake off the nerves, but it's difficult. Thank you for listening till the end. Tomás, if you hear a knock at 3 a.m. tonight, don't answer it. Maybe the next story is coming. Symbiotes for you. See you the Simpudas in your next nightmare.